Hey guys, tonight we're not standing in a courtroom with powdered wigs and polished wood. We're stepping into something older, colder, a world of scrolls, sandals, and silent verdicts. A world where justice didn't wear a blindfold, it wore a smirk. You might think Roman law was the foundation of all modern civilization, that it was fair, sophisticated, rational. But tonight, you'll see what happened when it stopped being about truth and started being about control. Because justice in Rome wasn't always about who did it. Sometimes it was about who could pay, or who had a patron, or who just happened to walk by at the wrong time. You'll meet the thief who never stole, the merchant crushed by a forgotten bylaw, the widow sentenced for mourning too loudly, and dozens more all trapped in a system more obsessed with order than with outcome. These aren't stories of monsters. There are no grand betrayals or wicked villains here. Just everyday people, tripped by bad luck, bad timing, or bad Latin. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Drop a comment if you like. It's always comforting to know this sleepy little community is still awake all across the world. And if these quiet, unsettling journeys through the past help you rest, maybe consider liking or subscribing. No pressure, only if it truly brings you peace. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan. Let the gentle hum settle your thoughts. Sink into the pillow. Let your shoulders unclench. You're not on trial. You're not waiting for a verdict. You're here. And tonight, we'll wander through the courts of Rome where guilt was negotiable, but punishment was not, and where being right was never enough. Let's begin. In that world, everything seemed clear. But in truth, it ran on the opposite ambiguity and fear. You broke a rule, you stood trial. But there were no lawyers, no prosecutors, no one to speak for you except you. You had to stand there in front of someone powerful and defend yourself. No training, no guidance, no friendly voice at your side, no one to whisper that you had the right to remain silent, no reminder that you didn't have to dig your own grave with your own words, just you, talking, explaining, or maybe pleading. Meanwhile, the person accusing you might be a landowner, a city magistrate, a man whose name the judge already knew, a man whose sandals didn't leave dust in the courtroom because he had someone to clean them. And their voice, it weighed more than yours, sometimes 100 times more, because in that system, words were not equal. They were measured, not by truth, but by status. If you were a commoner, your word counted for a fraction of a citizen's. If you were a woman, even less. If you were a slave, your voice wasn't a voice. It was noise unless that noise came from a tortured confession. Then, and only then, it was legally valid. And the laws you were supposed to follow, the great 12 tables, carved in bronze displayed for all to see, were noble in theory. But only if you could read them. Only if you understood the Latin. Only if someone had taught you what those words meant. For most people, the laws were not something you read. They were something you heard. From neighbors, from guards, from your cousin's cousin who once worked at the forum. Whispers and warnings passed around like bad bread, slightly stale, slightly twisted. So when you entered court, you weren't stepping into a place of clarity. You were stepping into a maze, one designed by men who already knew the way out. No map, no compass. No one to hold your hand, even if you had logic, even if you had truth. Even if you had done nothing wrong, there was no promise you'd be allowed to say so. Because in Rome, the right to speak wasn't a right. It was a privilege, granted to the few, denied to the many. Standing there, heart pounding in your chest palms damp with fear, you realized something. Roman law wasn't a shield. It was a language, a coded, precise, intimidating language. And if you didn't know how to speak it, you weren't a defendant. You were a body waiting to be judged. No lawyer, no advocate, no mercy written in the margins, just you. And a system that already knew how this would end. You thought justice was a scale. But here, it looked more like a stick, and the stick only landed on those who couldn't scream. Because in Rome, the law wasn't something universal. It was something selective, exclusive, and above all, convenient. If you were a citizen, then yes, the law applied to you. You had rights, you had recourse, you could appeal. In theory at least, but only about 10% of the people living in Rome were full citizens. Everyone else, they got something else entirely. If you were a woman, you didn't have full legal identity. You couldn't vote. You couldn't hold public office. You couldn't represent yourself in court without a male guardian. You couldn't even manage your own dowry in some periods, let alone accuse a senator of wrongdoing. You were not voiceless, but your voice had to be routed through someone else. And if that someone else didn't care, then neither did the court. If you were enslaved, you weren't even considered a person. You were property. You couldn't marry legally. You couldn't own anything. You couldn't testify unless tortured. And if someone killed you, it wasn't murder. It was damage to private goods, the same way someone might break a cart or lose a sheep. And if you were a foreigner, well, good luck. You might be subject to Roman law, or local law, or a combination of both. Or none at all, depending on who caught you and how they felt that morning. You could be tried by a Roman judge, even if you didn't speak Latin. You could be detained indefinitely while jurisdiction was sorted. You could be accused without clear charges, just suspicion, just rumors. And if you protested too loudly, they'd stop asking questions and start swinging clubs. Because in Rome, justice was a luxury, and not everyone got the same version. The full version, the kind with procedures, witnesses, formal appeals, that was reserved for a select few. Men of standing, citizens with names the judges recognized, people who mattered. The rest, they got the stick. Sometimes literally. You weren't handed rights when you were born. You earned them or inherited them or married into them. And if you didn't, you were exposed, unshielded, unheard. It's tempting to think ancient Rome was ahead of its time. And in some ways, maybe it was. They built roads, aqueducts, calendars. But when it came to justice, they built something else. A pyramid. The few at the top had the law. Everyone else, they had the consequences. So the next time you picture a Roman courtroom, don't imagine a balanced scale. Imagine a whip, and someone deciding who deserves it. And if that someone looked at you, well, you wouldn't have the words to object. You wouldn't be allowed to. One word from a magistrate could decide your fate. But it was the crowd that truly frightened you. Because in Rome, a trial wasn't always a private affair. It wasn't whispers in a closed room, solemn oaths under marble arches. It could happen anywhere. A temple courtyard, the open market, even the private home of the man judging your case. And the man, he was almost always a patrician part of the noble class. He didn't earn the role. He inherited it. He might be educated, sure. But he was also ambitious, connected, political. Because being a magistrate in Rome wasn't just about justice. It was a step up, a ladder rung, a chance to prove loyalty to powerful patrons. A chance to gain favors by punishing the right enemies or sparing the right friends. And you were not part of that equation. You were the variable that got canceled out. But it wasn't just the judge that shaped your outcome. It was the setting, the symbolism, the gods. Many court proceedings happened within or beside temples. Justice, they said, was sacred. Judges invoked divine order, swore oaths before statues, asked for signs, for omens, for thunder or silence. If the wind blew too hard during your testimony, some said it was a bad sign. If a bird flew overhead, it might be seen as approval or condemnation. And if the priest shook his head during your defense, that might carry more weight than any evidence. Because in the Roman mind, the law wasn't separate from the gods. It was backed by them. Which meant, if you lost, it wasn't just the court against you. It was the heavens. And then there was the crowd. Because a trial held in the forum wasn't quiet. It wasn't sealed off from gossip or opinion. It was public, spectacle, entertainment. Strangers gathered to watch. Neighbors muttered behind you. Vendors paused their trade just to hear what you'd say, and if they didn't like what they heard, they'd jeer, shout, sway the mood. Even a judge trying to be neutral would feel that pressure, because Rome was a society of image and influence. Letting someone off if the crowd disagreed made you look weak, and being weak was dangerous. So maybe you brought your best tunic. Maybe you rehearsed your words. Maybe your heart beat with hope that logic and clarity would save you. But in the end, it might not be the judge's reasoning that doomed you. It might be the subtle grimace of a priest, or the angry murmur of a fishmonger in the crowd, or the sudden gust of wind that arrived at the worst possible moment. And just like that, your truth unraveled. Because in Rome, justice wasn't just law. It was theater. And not everyone survived the show. Roman justice didn't wait. It moved quickly, and it rarely looked back. You might think there was some version of innocent until proven guilty, that the burden of proof lay with the accuser, that someone, somewhere, had to demonstrate that you had done something wrong before the punishment began. But in Rome, it wasn't like that. All it took was a voice, one accusation, one person, maybe angry, maybe mistaken, maybe jealous, pointing a finger and saying, "He did it." And then you had to disprove it. You had to untangle the knot someone else had tied. You had to speak fast, clearly, convincingly, and in a system that wasn't built for you to speak at all. Because the burden of proof didn't belong to the accuser. It belonged to the accused. If you were silent, that was suspicious. If you were nervous, that looked like guilt. If you stumbled over your words or said the wrong thing, it could be taken as confession. And no one had to bring forward evidence. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no careful chain of custody, just a story, told with confidence, repeated with the right amount of outrage. The courts didn't ask, "Is this proven?" They asked, "Do we believe it?" And once belief took root, it was hard to shake loose. Even small matters could spiral. A missing coin, a burned cart, a broken fence. Someone says they saw you. Someone else says they think you were nearby. And suddenly, you're in front of a magistrate with no lawyer, no defender, no margin for error. So people learned to accuse first, to speak before they were spoken about, to point fingers before fingers pointed at them. Because in that world, suspicion spread fast. It jumped from lips to ears, from streets to forums. A whisper became a rumor. A rumor became a trial. And no one wanted to be the one left defending themselves after the shouting started. So neighbors turned on neighbors. Friends hesitated before alibying each other. Everyone was watching, and more importantly, everyone knew they were being watched. In a city of marble and shadow, it didn't take much to be judged. You could be too quiet, too loud, too foreign, too poor. You didn't need to do something wrong. You just needed someone to say you had, and once they did, your innocence became your burden, your problem, your fight with no guarantee anyone would listen. Roman justice didn't wait for certainty. It didn't pause for second thoughts. It moved like a cart rolling downhill, and if you were standing in the way, you had to jump or be crushed. The morning began like any other. You walked past the fish stalls early before the sun had fully cleared the rooftops. The air was thick with salt and sweat and last night's wine. Vendors shouted prices. Children chased one another around marble columns. Someone was selling olives soaked in vinegar and herbs. You nearly stopped. And then you heard it. Not a scream. Not exactly. Just a voice raised too high for that hour. A scuffle. A curse. The scrape of sandals across stone. You turned like everyone else and saw two soldiers pulling a man by the arms, one on each side. Not dragging him. Not yet. But firm. Decisive. As if this was no more unusual than hauling sacks of grain. The man didn't look dangerous. He was barefoot. His tunic was dirty but not torn. His face was younger than you expected, and still no one moved. Not the woman carrying amphorae. Not the senator's servant who had just bought bread. Not the two elderly men debating philosophy under the shade of the basilica. Everyone watched. No one spoke. Because in the forum, you didn't interfere. Not unless you had a very good reason, and someone important to protect you afterward. You just observed, and hoped it wouldn't be you next. You stood there, body still but thoughts racing. What had he done? Theft? Insult? Failed to pay a debt at the wrong time in front of the wrong person? Or maybe nothing. Maybe someone had said something. Maybe someone needed to shift blame. Maybe the gods had simply rolled the dice this way today. One of the soldiers barked something short, sharp Latin, and the man winced as they turned him toward the steps of the basilica. You couldn't hear his reply, but you watched his feet. He hesitated, not to run, but as if taking one more moment to memorize the square. The light hitting the statues, the smell of citrus and smoke, the sound of people pretending not to see him. He might never see it again. And you said nothing. You shifted your weight. You looked back at the olives. You picked one out of politeness. You bit it even though you weren't hungry. And in the quietest place in your mind you whispered, "Please, not me. Not today." Because the forum wasn't just a place to buy and sell. It was a stage. And sometimes it picked its performers at random. One day, you were part of the audience. The next, you were the show. And if it was your arm twisted, your name shouted, your feet stumbling on those white marble stairs, then this is what you might have lived through, what you might still remember in the dark, what you might still dream about if you were lucky enough to survive. You don't even hear your name at first. There's too much noise. Vendors shouting over one another, hooves clicking on the stones, a child nearby crying for a fig she can't afford. You're looking at a cart of pomegranates, thinking maybe you'll buy one. And then a silence, not total, just different. The kind of pause that settles when something breaks the rhythm of the day. Then your name again, louder. Sharper this time, edged like a thrown knife. You turn, and there he is. A man maybe 40, maybe younger, maybe older, hard to tell with the sun in your eyes. His toga is rumpled, his face red. You can smell him before you hear him. Stole, he screams. He stole my coin purse. You blink. You don't even know him. He's swaying slightly from wine or from anger, you can't tell, but he's pointing straight at you. His voice echoes against the stones of the forum. And the worst part, no one's laughing. Two lictors are already moving towards you. The crowd parts for them with practiced ease like they've done this before. You hear sandals slapping stone, metal tapping against their staffs, a rhythm that doesn't belong in your morning. You raise your hands. You open your mouth. You want to say it's a mistake that you haven't taken anything, that you don't even carry a purse today. But it doesn't matter, because in Rome, accusation is momentum. And once it starts rolling, it's nearly impossible to stop. No one asks you for witnesses. No one checks your satchel. No one even speaks to you. The guards grab your arm, roughly, not violently, not yet. But it's clear you're not being invited. You're being claimed. You look around for someone, anyone who might speak up. The baker you've bought from every day for months. The fruit seller who knows your name. Even the boy with the figs, still watching wide-eyed from the stall. No one meets your gaze. Not because they believe you're guilty, but because they've seen this happen before. And they know that silence is safer. The ropes come out. They aren't needed, not really. But they make a statement. They bind you like a warning to everyone else. You're not guilty. Not yet. But in Rome, not yet doesn't mean much. You're being taken, not to safety, not to shelter, not even to a cell, but into a system that doesn't pretend to be blind. Justice watches. She listens, and she chooses who she sees. They don't tie your hands gently. The rope is rough, twisted hemp, reused too many times, stiff with salt and sweat. It rubs against your skin like a punishment for something you haven't done. And when it grazes the cut on your wrist, the one you earned last week unloading sacks of grain, you wince. Not loud, just enough for your breath to catch. The lictors don't notice. Or if they do, they don't care. They don't speak to you, they speak over you. Resisting one scoffs as he tightens the knot. You weren't, but it doesn't matter. They pull your arms behind your back hard until your elbows meet like lovers, forced together in a cruel kind of embrace. Your shoulders ache almost immediately. Your balance falters. Your feet catch on the uneven stones. You stumble once. Someone laughs. Not a stranger, a neighbor. You know his face. He sells dried figs near the water fountain. You've bought from him before. Said good morning, smiled. Now he chuckles and looks away, as if you've embarrassed him. You're not being walked. You're being displayed. Across the forum, past stalls and columns, past statues of stern men carved in marble. They don't look down, but the living do. There's no trial yet, no hearing, no chance to speak, but the punishment has already started. Because humiliation in Rome isn't the end of justice. It's the beginning. People step aside to make way for you, but they don't look away. They glance just long enough to confirm what they need to believe. Rumors bloom like wildflowers, fast, colorful, hard to uproot. You catch snippets as you pass. I heard he stole from a widow. They say he bribed a priest. Honestly, he's always looked suspicious. No one says your name, just he, like you're already fading. You don't shout, you don't plead, because here in the empire of law and logic, the louder you cry, the more guilty you seem. And if you stay quiet, they'll assume you're hiding something worse. There's no right pitch, no perfect volume. So you walk, not because you accept it, but because there's nothing else to do. You walk past open mouths and closed hearts, bound not by proof but by circumstance, not by guilt but by misfortune, toward a building you've passed 100 times. But today, it's different. Today, the doors will open for you, and they won't be offering shade, because inside silence is not safety. And explanations, even the honest ones, are rarely heard. It's not a courtroom, not the kind from scrolls or stories. No marble hall lined with philosophers. No wise man in a robe pounding a gavel. No jury of your peers leaning forward eager to hear your truth. Just a platform, slightly raised, wood worn smooth by hundreds of feet, and 1,000 broken hopes. A few magistrates in white, not pure white, but stained at the cuffs, wrinkled, dusted with sweat. They look sunburnt, tired, bored. One is chewing a fig. Another fans himself lazily with a folded decree. None of them are looking at you. You're shoved to your knees. The shackles groan against your bones. You shift not out of defiance, but to keep your balance. The stone beneath you is hot. The crowd murmurs behind you, but it's far away now. The air feels thick. Your ears hum, your mouth dry. Then your accuser steps forward. He's cleaner than before, straighter. Someone smoothed his toga. Maybe he splashed his face with water. Maybe someone told him what to say. He says you stole from him, that you brushed past him fast, and when he reached for his coin pouch, it was gone. He says he saw you look back, smirking. He does not mention the wine on his breath. He does not mention the bruises on his knuckles. He does not mention that he made a similar accusation 2 weeks ago, against someone else, and no one asks him to. The magistrates do not raise their eyebrows. They do not exchange glances. They do not say, "That seems odd," because it's not odd. Not here. The lead magistrate, older, broad-shouldered, with a nose that's been broken at least once, finally looks at you. He doesn't lean forward. He doesn't introduce himself. He just gestures vaguely in your direction, like swatting at a fly. Your defense. The words are soft, but they land like a stone. You open your mouth, but it's dry. You hadn't realized how dry. Your tongue sticks. The first word comes out like a cough. You try again, louder, clearer, but by then he's already looked away. He's already lifting a hand to shade his eyes from the sun. Silence, shrugs. That's all it takes. No records are read. No witnesses are summoned. No one asks where you were or what you were doing. Because in Rome, a defense is not a shield. It's a ritual, a box to be checked, a line in a play that's already been written. You were supposed to deliver it cleanly, confidently, with just enough fear to feel sincere. You didn't. So now the next line begins, and it's not yours. There's a breeze now. It stirs your hair, lifts the dust, and with it come the voices, not from the magistrates. They're quiet, one of them picking something from his teeth. Another scratches a mark into a wax tablet without looking up. The sound comes from behind you, from below the platform, from the crowd. People who stopped to watch, people who had no plans to be here this morning but found themselves drawn in anyway. Some came for olives, some to gossip. Now they've found a story. You hear them whisper. "She looks like trouble. I think he's from the Subura. Didn't he once yell at a merchant?" Someone laughs. It's not cruel, just casual, comfortable, as if your shame fits neatly into their day. You see a woman young, maybe a mother, shift her weight. She pulls her child closer when she glances your way. She doesn't speak, but her eyes say everything. Your danger, your filth. You're the thing parents warn their children about, not because you are, but because you've been pointed at. And suddenly you know. This trial ended before it began. It ended before your first step forward, before the rope, before the question. The real court was never the platform. It was here, in the dust, in the stairs, in the subtle lean of bodies. The way people recoiled, not out of fear but out of shared assumption. They don't know you, but they've decided you. The magistrate squints, looks out toward the crowd. He's not reading scrolls, not weighing evidence. He's gauging mood. And when he sees it, the shrug of the crowd, the nods, the silence that feels like consent, he speaks. "Fine," he says, as if the outcome bores him. Flogged. 3 lashes, that's it. No explanation, no elaboration. Just a sentence tossed like crumbs to pigeons. Your accuser grins, his shoulders square, proud and victorious. He nods too, as if this is how justice is supposed to work, as if justice was ever the point. The crowd stirs, a few satisfied glances, a yawn. Someone mutters about missing the fish auction. And then they leave. Just like that. You're still kneeling, your arms still bound, your back not bleeding yet. But it will be. You breathe in. The dust tastes different now. Heavier. Like something settled on your shoulders. And no one looks back. Because in Rome, they don't stay to watch the punishment. Just long enough to feel certain it was deserved. And then they move on. You could have shouted. You could have fallen to your knees, clutched the hem of the magistrate's tunic, sworn by Jupiter, and every god you remembered from childhood. You could have pounded your fists against the stones, made your voice echo off the pillars, wept until the dust clung to your face like ash. But you didn't. And maybe that's the problem. Because here in this city that sings the praises of law and order, there is no right volume, no correct decibel for innocence. If you scream too loud, too desperate, must be lying. If you stay too calm, too composed, clearly guilty. There is no sweet spot, only suspicion, and everyone's got enough of it to spare. You remember your cousin. He once stood where you are now. Wrong place, wrong time. Someone accused him of defacing a statue. He cried, sobbed actually, and his voice cracked when he said, "I swear on my mother's grave." They let him go. Later, he admitted he had done it. You're not a crier. Your throat locks when it matters. Your face betrays nothing. You grew up believing that stillness was strength, that silence meant self-control. But in Rome, silence is a blank scroll, and people write whatever they want on it. Some say guilt has a smell, like sweat, or fear, or rot. But here it has a volume, a pitch, a presence, and yours wasn't loud enough. So now you kneel, hands tied, mouth closed. And everyone feels comfortable deciding you, because silence in this place doesn't mean you're noble. It means you're hiding something. The lictor doesn't even glance at you before stepping forward. His whip coils in his hand like a question that doesn't need to be asked. Your punishment begins, not because they know what you did, but because they couldn't hear what you didn't. And in Rome, that's enough. They don't flog you in private. That would be mercy. And mercy is in short supply today. You're led through the streets, still bound, still bleeding, though the blood isn't visible yet. The ropes dig into your wrists, but it's not the pain you feel most. It's the air. The way it shifts around you, the way people turn to watch. The punishment takes place outside the bathhouse, not inside where water might soothe you, not behind it where a wall might shield you, but on the steps, in the open. Mid-morning. It's a good time. The forum is full. Merchants haggling, citizens gossiping, children chasing each other with wax dolls. And now you're the new attraction. The lictor announces your sentence, not with words, but with the sound of tearing cloth. Your tunic is ripped from the shoulders. It flutters, then drops like a shed skin. Your back is bare, pale, exposed. Someone whistles. You hear laughter. Not cruel, not kind, just casual. The lictor raises his staff. Not the long fasces, just a whip today. Leather wrapped around a wooden grip, cracked from use. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't look at you at all. 1. The sound is louder than you expect. A slap, then a sting, then heat, sharp, immediate. 2. You bite your tongue. The taste of blood, coppery bitter, pools under your teeth. You don't want to scream. You don't want to give them anything. 3. Your knees buckle. They hit stone. Your vision tilts. Somewhere behind you a child counts out loud. Another giggles. You try not to listen. But you do. You see the vendor, the one who sold you bread just yesterday, standing nearby. He's not laughing. He's not jeering. He's shaking his head, slowly, like he always suspected this about you. Like he's disappointed, but not surprised. You don't remember the rest. The lashes blur, heat and stone, sweat and dust, noise and silence mixed into something that doesn't make sense. And then it's over. You're not untied, just released, dropped like refuse onto the street. People walk around you. Some walk through your shadow. Some don't walk away at all. They linger, just to see what you'll do next. The pain? It fades. Eventually, that's what pain does. But the shame clings. It's stitched into the torn fabric at your feet. It hides in the bruises you'll carry for weeks. It lives in the memory of every face that watched and didn't turn away. Because here in Rome, justice isn't just about the wound. It's about who saw it happen, and how many turned it into a story. Not all are punished equally, you know that. But today you feel it. The man beside you, you met him just hours ago. In the holding pen. He was sitting on the ground, rubbing his shoulder, mumbling to himself, in a dialect you almost recognized. He told you his name, but you forgot it in the noise. What you remember is the smell of olives. He said he was sent to buy some. His master wanted the green ones, not too soft. He held the basket with both hands like it was a child. Then someone in the crowd, dropped a jar. The sound shattered the air, and the guards came running. They looked at him, looked at the mess. Didn't ask a question, just pointed, and grabbed him. You were still in the corner watching when they dragged him to the steps. No trial, no magistrate, no chance. Now he's on his knees, just like you were. But different, because he doesn't get a sentence. He gets a punishment. The whip cracks again, and again. His back arches, his head jerks, his arms are tied tighter than yours, were not to restrain but to remind. He cries out, but his screams don't echo. Not here. They get swallowed by the stone, by the crowd, by the quiet agreement that he's not meant to be heard. You ask someone, a woman watching nearby, holding a clay jug in the crook of her elbow, is he guilty? She doesn't look at you, doesn't pause. She just says he's a slave. And that's the answer. That's the whole of it. Because in Rome, guilt isn't always about actions. Sometimes it's about status. Sometimes it's about silence. Sometimes it's about being the closest body to blame. And when you're a slave, your body is already owned. Your breath is borrowed. Your blood is not yours to lose. Your life is just an extension of someone else's reputation. And if they decide it's better for that reputation to come with bruises, then bruises you get. You watch the lashes fall. You don't count them. There's no number, no limit, no reason. The vendor from earlier is still nearby. He watches too, but this time he doesn't shake his head, doesn't seem surprised. He just turns away as if the scene isn't worth finishing. And maybe it's not, because here justice isn't about fairness, or even the law. Sometimes it's just about reminding you who doesn't get either. Not every punishment is scheduled. There's no decree, no public announcement, no magistrate scratching a tablet or lictor reciting your offense. Sometimes it just happens. A guard's in a bad mood. The sun is too hot. Someone laughed too loud in the wrong direction. Or maybe a merchant had a pouch go missing or says it did and wants a reminder sent into the streets. Not to the thief, to everyone. Sometimes it's completely random. And today, it finds you. You're walking, slowly, back hunched, still sore from the lash, still trying not to look like something that invites more attention. You think you're invisible, but you're not. A guard sees you. You don't see him until it's too late. You hear the step, first fast, deliberate, and then a voice, rough and casual. You turn confused. That's enough. The staff swings, low and hard. It catches your ribs before your thoughts catch up. Your breath goes somewhere. Your knees follow. And then your head hits the stone. Everything flickers, not out, just sideways, like the world lost its balance. The stars come not from the sky, but from behind your eyes. Flashes of light with no origin. Your ears ring. Someone shouting, but you don't know who. Maybe you, maybe not. A boot lands somewhere near your shoulder. Not a kick, just a statement. Then silence. Not because the moment is over, but because it was never meant to be long. The guard walks away. He doesn't write anything down, doesn't report it. There's no record, no punishment issued, no name called, just you, curled in the dust, your ribs aching in ways that make breathing a task. Your vision still swimming. People pass, they see you. They don't stop. One steps over you with a muttered idiot. Another glances, then turns his gaze to the awning of a nearby shop, something safer to look at. Because everyone knows some punishments in Rome don't come from guilt. They come from glances, a look too long, a face remembered, a posture mistaken for defiance. And your body already bruised, already marked, is easier to swing at than to question. So you lie there. No sentence, no trial. Just pain. And in Rome, that counts. You survive the blows, barely. Your ribs ache with every step. Your back burns where the lashes broke skin. Your breath comes in short, uneven bursts, like your body is trying not to remember what just happened. But the next wound doesn't bleed. It empties. You're handed a notice scrawled hastily on a wooden tablet, not a scroll. You're not important enough for parchment. It lists your name, the accusation, and then the number 300 denarii. You blink. You read it again, as if repetition might shave a digit off the end. You don't have 3. You've never held 30. Your father died, owing more than that, and the creditors still visit your mother with fake smiles and real threats. You try to speak, try to explain. The magistrate doesn't look up. He waves you away like smoke from a candle. Administrative burden, that's all you are now. So they take what they can. Your cloak threadbare, patched twice by your sister, is the first to go. One of the guards lifts it without comment, folds it loosely, and hands it to your accuser like a butcher passing over meat. Then, your tools, the worn chisel, the mallet, the pouch of nails you kept wrapped in cloth. They don't ask what you need them for. They don't care that it's how you survive. You try to protest, whisper something about labor, about work, but you're still coughing blood. The words don't land, and then, your sister's dowry. It wasn't much, just a set of bangles, a coffer with linens, a bronze pendant shaped like a dove. She was saving it, hoping for spring, for someone kind. Now it's gone before she even gets to wear it. No ceremony, no explanation, just a shrug, a mark made on a tablet. You glance at your accuser. He's smirking. Not because he needs your things, he doesn't, but because he knew. He knew you were poor, knew your family owed, knew that the easiest way to rob you was to accuse you. Because in Rome, injustice isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with a shout or a sword. Sometimes it walks quietly in fine sandals. With good teeth and soft hands, it calculates, it plans, and the city doesn't punish it. It rewards it. Because Rome, for all its laws and legions, loves one thing more than justice accounting. You hear stories, not whispered rumors, not anymore. These ones are said out loud, in bathhouses, in markets, even in the taverns where broken men go to forget the way Rome remembers them. Stories of senators who stole land, who forged deeds, who bribed priests with gold and silence, men who made laws in the morning and broke them by dusk. What happened to them? They paid a fine, threw a feast, nodded to the right people, walked free, forgiven, re-elected sometimes, praised for their cleverness, and you tripped. You bumped into the wrong man on the wrong day in the wrong clothes. He said you stole something. You didn't. But the guards didn't need a second opinion. Just a reason. You try not to dwell on it, but the math is simple. One mistake, and you lose your job, the one you begged for, the one that barely fed you. You lose your name because now you're just that thief. You lose your dignity, which was thin to begin with, like your shoes. And maybe if the gods aren't distracted, you lose your life. Not with a sword. That's too noble. No, with hunger, with shame, with the cold creeping into your bones because your cloak was taken for compensation. You remember when people used to greet you. Now they look away. You remember when you were invisible. Now you're seen, but only as a warning. Rome punishes the guilty. Of course it does, sometimes. But it punishes the unlucky even faster. The poor even louder. The quiet even more thoroughly. Because when you don't have gold, or a name, or a patron to whisper in a senator's ear, you're not innocent. You're just available. You're just there standing in the wrong spot when justice needs an example. So you bleed, so you kneel, so you disappear. Not because of what you did, but because you were small enough to step on. And in Rome, that's all it takes. He swore he saw it, swore on his father's ashes, on his son's name, on the gods themselves, who must have been very tired of being dragged into lies. He stood tall, tunic clean, hair oiled and arranged like someone who expected to be looked at. You weren't even near the man when the theft happened. But that didn't matter, because in Rome, words don't need to be true. They just need to be loud, and fast, and dressed well. He said he saw you, said you lingered, said you looked nervous. You did look nervous because you were being watched, because the guards were already moving, because you could feel the weight of a wrong moment settling onto your back. And still you tried to speak, to explain, but your voice cracked, your sandals were worn, and when you looked at the magistrate, he didn't look back. But when the witness did, he smiled, and the magistrate smiled too. That's all it took. No evidence, no scroll, no confirmation. Just a man with clean hands saying your name like it already belonged in chains. Because truth in Rome, it's not about what happened. It's about who says it happened. And how they say it. With what tone, with what posture. If you blink too much, you're lying. If you blink too little, you're hiding something. If you blink just right, but you're poor, no one's watching anyway. The witness didn't need proof. He just needed presence, confidence, and the right friends. He got a nod. You got a rope. And as you were dragged from the forum, you turned back one last look. He was already walking away. Not hurried, not ashamed, just done. Like you were an errand he'd finished. A lie he'd told so often it didn't feel like one anymore. Maybe he believed it. Or maybe it didn't matter. Because in Rome, the lie doesn't have to last. Only long enough to ruin you. You never stole. Not once, not a fig, not a coin, not even the bread you couldn't afford last winter. But your cousin did. Years ago. He got caught with a merchant's ring tucked in his belt. Said it was a mistake. Said it wasn't his. Didn't matter. The forum never forgets, even when the law does. So now when a man points at you, says something's missing, he adds a single sentence. They're from the same family. That's it. That's the evidence. The magistrate nods. Not because he remembers your cousin, but because he remembers the type. Your name, your district, your sandals. And suddenly, it's not just your trial. It's your father's debts, your uncle's temper, your cousin's mistake, reaching forward like a shadow and draping itself across your shoulders. A neighbor mutters something. You know how they are. The words aren't even loud. But someone hears, and now it's known. Unspoken, but planted. A merchant scowls as you pass. You've never wronged him, but he's certain he's heard your name before. Somewhere. His suspicion becomes your record. You try to speak. You say, that wasn't me. You say, I've done nothing. But in Rome, defense doesn't sound like truth. It sounds like deflection. Every denial is another reason to doubt. You think of your mother. How she warned you when your cousin was taken away, even clean hands leave prints. And here you are, hands shaking, voice cracking, trying to explain that someone else's actions shouldn't cost you your freedom. But the crowd isn't listening. The magistrate isn't listening. They don't need to prove what you did. They just need to suggest it, to tilt the story, to say maybe, to say he's the type. And then the weight of that maybe becomes real, becomes a sentence, becomes your life rewritten by someone else's past. Because in Rome, the law doesn't always chase facts. Sometimes it just follows a name. You weren't alone. There was someone, a woman, selling dates. You remember the dust on her fingers, the way she weighed each fruit with care, even though no one ever checked. She was right there across from you, close enough to hear your voice, to see you not take the coin purse. But she's not here now. She packed up before sunrise, gone to the next market, maybe Tiber, maybe Ostia, maybe somewhere without shouting or chains or magistrates who never look you in the eye. You try to tell them. She saw everything you say. She was right there. The magistrate doesn't even raise his head. He just mutters, no witness present, no defense given, as if truth has a clock. And yours ran out. You think of her again, not her name, because you never asked, but her eyes. How they met yours when the guards came. How she hesitated, then looked away. Not because she didn't believe you, but because she knew the risk. Words in Rome have weight, and hers wasn't heavy enough to carry both of you. So she left. And now you stand here, accused alone, and with no one to vouch for the hour that could have saved you. Because in Rome, a truth unspoken is no better than a lie. It doesn't count. It doesn't echo. It doesn't leave a mark. You try to insist. She knows I didn't. But the sentence dies halfway. Because even as you say it, you realize the law doesn't chase down your witnesses. It doesn't search for truth like a thing lost in the dark. It waits. It listens. And if silence is all it hears, then silence becomes your voice. You are innocent. You know you are. But there's no one left to say it with you. And in Rome, that's the same as guilt. Because innocence here has an expiration date, and yours just passed. You said nothing. Not because you were hiding, but because you didn't know what to say. Because when the accusation hit, it knocked the words out of you. And now, they'll help you remember. They call it persuasion, a gentle word for what's about to happen. A curtain drawn over cruelty, Your hands are tied behind your back. Not with rope, not anymore, but with intent. Twisted high, pulled upward until your elbows scream, until your shoulders leave their sockets and logic leaves your breath. The pain is white, then red, then something worse, something without color, without name. Just pulsing, endless being. You try not to cry out, because even that feels like a concession, but your body betrays you, and then you hear yourself speak. The words don't feel like yours, but they come from your mouth. Yes, I did it. I took the purse. Not because it's true. Not because memory suddenly sharpened, but because the only thing louder than guilt is pain. And you want it to stop. When it finally does, someone's already writing. A scribe with neat letters, calm hands. He's not sweating, you are. He writes your name, your crime, your confession. It's not signed in ink. It's signed in sweat, in muscle tremors, in broken cartilage, and the shame of your own voice echoing back at you. You slump. The guards untie you. They don't look proud. They don't look angry, just finished. You lie on the ground, ribs, shaking teeth, biting through your tongue just to stay here, just to stay real, because even if you live, that paper lives longer. It doesn't bruise. It doesn't heal. It will follow you, through courts, through gossip, through doors that never open again. It will outlast your innocence, your silence, your screams. Because in Rome, justice doesn't ask whether the truth was forced. It only asks whether it was spoken. And now it was. He spits at your feet, not because you stole, but because you didn't bow, didn't say domine when you passed him in the forum, didn't lower your eyes when he raised his voice, didn't play the part he thinks you were born to play. And now he's furious. Not about a missing coin purse that's just a script. He's angry because you forgot your place. That's what he tells the court. He disrespected me, he says. Didn't greet him properly. Didn't apologize for breathing his air. The magistrate listens, not to your side, not to your silence, but to him, a man with a title, with sandals that don't crack at the heel, with friends in the city watch. Now it's not theft, it's insolence, a far worse crime in a city built on status and pride. You try to explain that you were in a hurry, that you didn't mean it, that you didn't even see him. But the magistrate lifts his hand, not to stop the accuser, not to call for order, but to stop you. No more words. You've said enough, apparently. Even if you haven't said anything at all. He nods. Triple the fine, he says. It's not justice, it's theater. And today, the act of not bowing low enough costs you more than you've ever earned. You look around. No one meets your eyes. Because everyone understands what just happened. This isn't about the law. It never was. It's about honor. And honor in Rome doesn't mean dignity. It means hierarchy. It means knowing who stands above you and staying there. You feel your hands curl, not into fists, just tighter, like you're holding on to the last shred of understanding. Because now you know. The law isn't there to protect everyone equally. It's there to protect those who already feel insulted, the ones who mistake respect for submission, and offense for injury. And you didn't steal. You just forgot to look small enough. And in Rome, that's more than enough to pay for. It was supposed to be a flogging. That's what they told you. 3 lashes, maybe 5. Then you'd limp home, keep your head down, pray to gods who never seem to answer in full sentences. But this morning a clerk pulled your name, didn't look you in the eye, didn't read your sentence, just saw a file and a gap in the schedule. Because there's a shortage of condemned men this week, and the arena can't be empty. The lions still need feeding. The crowd needs their screams. You ask why. You ask what happened to your sentence. The guard just shrugs. Consider it an honor, he says. The gods see your sacrifice. But you don't feel honored. You feel cold. Your mouth tastes of copper, and the chains on your wrists rattle like the bones of men who once stood where you're standing now. They dress you in a plain tunic, nothing flashy. You're not a gladiator. You won't get a sword, or armor, or even a chance. You're not here to fight. You're here to die well. The gates open. Sunlight floods in like it's proud of itself. And the crowd roars. They don't know your name. They don't know what you did or didn't do. They don't care. To them, you're today's thrill. A smear of red on the sand. A half-second of tension before the lion makes its move. You try to step back. Your legs won't move. You hear a priest's voice in the distance, blessing the sacrifice. You wonder if he'd still pray with the same tone if it were his son behind the gate. Then a growl, deep, low, alive. You turn just in time to see it the lion, its mane matted, its eyes yellow and indifferent. And in that moment you understand what this really is. Not justice, not punishment, a cover-up. Someone needed a body, and yours was on top of the pile. They'll forget your name, forget your crime, forget your face. But they'll remember the sound you made, that long, tearing scream, just before the lion reached your throat. They'll cheer, they'll toss figs. They'll say it was justice, even if it wasn't. And Rome will move on. You didn't hire a defender, not because you didn't want to, but because you couldn't. Defenders cost denarii. You barely had sandals, but someone offers help. A man in the forum, wrinkled tunic, confident stride. He says he knows the law, knows the magistrates, knows how things work. He listens to your story. He nods thoughtfully. He says all the right words, grossa injuria, iniquitas, venia. You don't know Latin, but he speaks like someone who stood in court before. You want to believe him. So you do. You follow him to a quiet corner near the basilica. You give him your last 3 denarii, your sister's dowry coin, the silver one your mother hid in a cloth. You press it into his palm. He says tomorrow, "Be ready, I'll speak for you." You nod. You sleep better that night than you have in days, because maybe, just maybe, someone will stand beside you. The next morning you wait. You stand outside the magistrate's hall, sun rising, sweat beading, and you wait, and wait. But he never comes. You ask a clerk if he's seen the man you give a name. The clerk frowns. The magistrate overhears and laughs. Him, he shakes his head. He's been dead for a year. You blink. Dead no. You saw him, touched him, gave him coin, but the magistrate's already turned away. The trial begins, and you have no defender, no one to speak, only a heart heavy with shame, not because you were fooled, but because you hoped. You try to explain, try to say you were misled, but even that feels like a lie in this place. The magistrate sighs. Everyone's misled, he says, especially the guilty. You don't respond. What would be the point in Rome? The only thing cheaper than justice is hope. And you spent yours yesterday on a name no one remembers, on a ghost in a market, on the idea that someone, anyone, might help you. You walk away from court that day, not just poorer, but hollowed. Because in a city full of laws, you learned the one that matters most. You only get the justice you can afford. You're not convicted, not yet, but you're still not free. The magistrate didn't say guilty, didn't say much at all, just nodded to a lictor who nodded to another, and that's how you ended up here. In the dark. The cell isn't wide, it's wet. The stone sweats, the floor seeps. You don't sit, you perch, on a patch that's less damp than the rest. Your back still aches from the flogging. Your wrists are raw from rope burn. And now the rats have found you. They don't fear people here. Not anymore. They dart between feet, chew through sandals, sleep in folds of tunics. You ask the guard how long you'll stay. He shrugs, until they remember you. That could be a day, could be a month, could be never. Because in Rome, prison isn't a sentence, it's a waiting room. And sometimes they forget to call your name. You learn the rules quickly. Don't drink from the middle bucket. Don't sleep near the barred window. That's where the wind turns coldest. Don't speak to the man in the corner who talks to ghosts. You count time by meals, a crust of bread, a ladle of something gray. Sometimes nothing. You dream of sunlight, but it burns your eyes when it finally comes. And when, if they release you, you don't walk out whole. You walk out with lice burrowed in your hair, with a limp that wasn't there before, with a cough that doesn't go away. But worse than all that, the reputation. Because people don't ask what happened. They don't say, "Oh, you were innocent." They say he was in prison, and that's enough. Enough to lose a job. Enough to scare away a landlord. Enough to make a mother pull her child to the other side of the street. Because in Rome, innocence doesn't buy you freedom. It doesn't buy you dignity. And it certainly doesn't buy you a clean cell. It only buys you time. Time in the dark. Time in the damp. Time no one gives back. You should be grateful. That's what they say. The magistrate's voice was almost kind this time. No sneer, no shouting. Just a quiet word, exilium. Exile, not execution, not chains. Just a decree, leave. Leave the city you were born in. Leave the courtyard where you learned to walk. Leave the fig tree whose shade remembers your mother's laughter. Leave everything, and do it in one day. No trial, no appeal. Just one stamped scroll and a guard who doesn't meet your eyes. You ask for directions. They hand you silence. You ask for bread. They give you a look. The gates open before you. Behind a city that no longer claims you. Ahead, dust, hills, the horizon. You take a step, and with that, you become a stranger. Not a citizen, not a criminal. Something in between, marked not by what you did, but by where you can no longer go. They call it mercy. That's the word they use. Because your neck was spared. Because your back is unbroken. Because they let you walk. But mercy should feel warm. This feels hollow, because you weren't just cut from the city. You were cut from memory. No one speaks your name now. Not at the fountain, not at the forum, not in the home where your bed still holds the shape of your sleep. Even your family must be careful. To help you is to risk joining you. They offer prayers instead of coin, whispers instead of farewells. And if your feet ever find their way back, even by mistake, even in desperation, even to die near familiar stone, the punishment is death. No questions, no mercy a second time. You once thought exile meant travel, maybe even freedom. But on the road you learn the truth. Exile is not a journey. It's an erasure, a slow fade from maps, from memories, from mattering. Because in Rome, exile is branded as kindness. But what it really is forgetting with formality. And as the city fades behind you, and the wind carries your name away with the dust, you understand, this isn't escape. It's abandonment. Wrapped in law, delivered with a bow. And you're supposed to say, thank you. They bring out the iron, not the sword, not the whip. Something smaller, more permanent. The branding rod glows too red to look at. The guard holds it with thick gloves, as if even touching punishment requires distance. You ask what the symbol means. No one answers. You're told it's for record keeping, that it will speak for you when you cannot. You want to run, but you don't, because two lictors grip your arms. Because the door is barred. Because you know there's no version of this story where you walk away untouched. They press it to your skin forearm first, if they're feeling merciful. If not, your forehead. The sound comes before the pain, a hiss, sharp and living, like meat on a pan, like your body becoming history. Then the pain hits. It's not the worst you felt, but it's the most final, because pain fades. But this mark stays. A few seconds, a few letters, and now everyone will know. You're released later, clutching your arm, flesh still weeping. The first merchant you approach sees the scar and shakes his head. No words, just a gesture. He doesn't care what you did, just what they did to you. A boy on the street points. A woman pulls her child away. You're not a man anymore. You're a warning. Your skin tells a story no one bothers to fact-check. They see the mark and decide everything else. What you stole, why you deserved it, why they shouldn't risk being near you. You become used to doors closing faster than you can knock, to eyes that squint then avert, to whispers that don't bother with your name. You wrap your arm, wear long sleeves, but in summer, it's too hot. And if it's your forehead, there's no hiding that. At night, you dream of water, of washing it away, of scrubbing until skin turns raw and then smooth again. But when you wake, it's still there, and so is the smell, that ghost of burning, that first betrayal of your own body. Because in Rome, not all punishments end at the gate. Some follow you home, to market, to temple, to bed. And even when the pain dulls, the world keeps touching the scar with their eyes. You weren't sentenced to death, but something died anyway. The version of you that could move unseen. That could be just a man. Now you're a mark, a memory, a walking verdict, and Rome never forgets its branding, even when you wish you could. The astrologer arrives before the magistrate, not in robes, not with scrolls, just a soft smile and a star chart tucked under one arm. He doesn't look at you. He looks at the heavens. He asks your birth date. The hour. Whether your mother labored under a full moon or a waning one. You want to ask what that has to do with the missing coin. But no one else seems confused. He runs his fingers across the parchment. Lines, houses, movements of planets drawn in ink that smells faintly of lavender. He hums. Mars was in retrograde, he says. Saturn, he explains, cast a long shadow over your sign. Your moon is in a house of conflict. Your chart, he says, reveals a tendency for subversion, for theft, for deceit. He doesn't say you did it. He says you were meant to. And the magistrate who moments ago looked bored now leans forward, nods, as if Jupiter himself whispered judgment into his ear. You try to speak, to ask about evidence, about witnesses, about the woman with the date card who saw everything, but your voice sounds small beside the stars. The astrologer keeps speaking. There's unrest in his fourth house, he says, and just like that, your fate is sealed. Not by testimony, not by proof, but by orbits drawn long before you were born. The sentence is light a fine some lashes, but the weight feels cosmic. You wonder if your mother had labored 1 hour later. Would it have changed? If your stars had shifted just a little, would you be walking free, or would someone else be kneeling here in your place? But wondering changes nothing, because here guilt isn't something proven, it's something predicted. You aren't punished for your choices, you're punished for your chart. And in Rome, astrology isn't gentle. It isn't a curiosity or a comfort, it's a gavel. Wrapped in stardust, dropped like thunder. The crowd murmurs as you're led away. Some nod, impressed by the astrologer's precision. Some shake their heads, muttering about fate and family lines. But no one asks you what actually happened, because the answer was already written. Not in deeds, but in constellations. The lictor is bored. He's standing in the sun. His tunic sticks to his back. There's dust in his sandals. And your face, your name, they don't mean anything to him. He's seen too many like you, too many petty disputes, too many poor men trying to explain too much, too many hours wasted marching the accused from forum to forum only for some magistrate to wave it all off with a yawn. He doesn't want to make the walk. Not today. So he doesn't. He makes a choice, no scroll, no witness, no formal accusation. He just tightens his grip on the fasces, that bundle of rods Rome gave him as a symbol of authority. And then without a word he swings. Once. It lands across your back hard, fast, cruel in its efficiency. Twice. This one catches your ribs. The breath is knocked clean from your lungs. You stagger, fall. Your face hits the stone. Dust fills your mouth. You reach for balance, but there's none to be found. The lictor doesn't linger. He doesn't look back. Doesn't offer a reason. Just turns, adjusts his belt, and disappears into the crowd. No one writes this down. There's no verdict, no record, no line etched into some dusty archive. Only bruises. They'll fade, but the lesson won't. You stay on the ground for a while, because standing means being seen. And being seen means being noticed again. The people who watched, they don't move. They saw what you saw. They learned what you just learned. That in Rome, justice doesn't always wear robes or carry scrolls. Sometimes it walks the streets in sandals, tired, irritable, armed, and if it had a bad night's sleep, or skipped breakfast, or simply didn't like your face, then you become the judgment. Not because of what you did, but because he could. You were unlucky. And, in this city, that's often worse than being guilty. It starts with a whisper. Not an accusation, not a formal charge, just a murmur, behind a curtain, over a loaf of bread, between two neighbors who don't even remember why they started whispering in the first place. He's been acting strange. I saw him take something. He walks too fast, doesn't he? You don't hear it at first, but the city does. It spreads like mold, quiet and visible, until it's everywhere. A merchant eyes you longer than usual. The baker weighs your coins twice. Your friend, the one who used to share wine, now crosses the street. No one says it to your face, but you feel it, in the silence, in the stares, in the way doors seem slower to open when you knock. By the time the guards come for you, there's no shock, no protest. Even your mother doesn't cry out. Because in Rome, once a rumor begins, the truth becomes optional. You're led through the forum, not bound in rope, but in something tighter suspicion. The crowd doesn't need details. They've already filled in the blanks. He's guilty of something. The magistrate barely looks up from his bench. Charges he asks. There are none. Just voices, hushed ones, a neighbor, a cousin. A man who once saw you drop a coin and not pick it up. No scroll, no signature. But still enough. Because when enough people say something, Rome listens. Not to the facts, to the volume. You try to speak. You say you didn't do it, didn't steal, didn't lie, didn't break any law. But the magistrate shrugs. If they all say it, can they all be wrong? You open your mouth again. But the air is thicker now. And the sentence? It's already decided. Not by evidence, but by repetition. Because here a whisper can turn into a noose. And once it wraps around your name, every denial just pulls it tighter. It's not personal. You need to remember that. They don't hate you. They don't even know your name. But someone stole from the forum last week. A purse. A handful of rings, maybe more. The details don't matter. Only that no one was caught. And the magistrate he was blamed. Too soft, they said. Too slow, letting crime go unanswered. So now, someone has to answer. You. Not because you were there. Not because there's proof. But because you're easy. You're poor. Unconnected. Your name's not carved on any family wall. No senator eats at your table. No priest blesses your doorway. You're summoned. No trial, really more of a formality. A scroll is read aloud. The charge is vague, the sentence specific. Execution. Before sunset, in the forum, publicly. The magistrate signs with a sigh, like he's approving a roof repair. And you don't scream, because there's no one to hear it. You walk, flanked by guards, past people who don't meet your eyes, past children pointing, mothers pulling them away. They build the platform quickly. They tie your hands methodically. One rope, one knot, one nod. No last words. Just a crowd not mourning you, not judging you, just watching you. The executioner doesn't ask your name. He just waits for the signal. The magistrate lifts his hand, and then it's done. Your legs fold, your breath catches, your story ends. But your usefulness begins. Because tonight, they'll talk about you. In baths, in taverns, in temples. They'll tell their children what happens when the law is ignored. They'll say the magistrate acted swiftly, justly. They won't remember what you looked like, or why you were chosen. They'll just remember that someone paid. And that was enough. Because in Rome, justice isn't just about guilt. Sometimes it's about keeping the rhythm of fear alive. And today, you were its beat. They say your hearing is postponed. It happens. The magistrate is out. The scrolls are being recopied. The witnesses aren't ready yet. So you wait. You ask how long. The guard shrugs. A few days, he says. The cell is cold. Stone and straw. You sleep near the wall to avoid the drip from above. Another day passes. Then another. No one speaks to you unless they're handing you a crust of bread. If they remember. Your name fades from the docket. Your voice weakens from disuse. The sun doesn't visit here. Just the shadows longer, each time heavier. You count cracks, count footfalls. Count the way your thoughts start to bend like wood left out in the rain. You were accused of something. You remember that much. You try to repeat it to yourself, to keep it fresh. But even that starts to fade. The details smudge. And then one morning, the cell door opens. They call your name. You rise too slowly. Limp when you didn't before. In court, the magistrate glances at your scroll. There's a pause. He turns to the clerk. What was this one again? The clerk shrugs. Missing witness? Some kind of theft or disturbance. It's unclear. The magistrate sighs, then looks at you. He doesn't remember your face. But he sees the dirt, the limp, the hollowed eyes. You look guilty. You try to speak, to explain that the delay wasn't yours, that you waited, but your voice cracks. It's not strong enough to carry. The magistrate waves his hand. Time served, he says. And that's that. No verdict, no closure. Just a phrase that sounds almost kind if you forget what it really means. You leave with nothing. No name cleared, no coin, no apology, just lice and bruises. And the understanding that justice delayed is still punishment. Because in Rome, forgetting isn't a mistake. It's a sentence of its own. And you were never supposed to be remembered in the first place. Your sandals are cracked. The leather gave out weeks ago. You've tied them with frayed string, hoping no one notices. Your tunic stitched too many times. Each thread tells a story of trying to make something last. Your fingernails are chipped. Your hands rough from grain, from hauling, from living. And when you speak, they hear it. Not your words, your poverty. You speak clearly, but your voice sounds desperate, because desperation is stitched into every inch of you. The magistrate doesn't look up. But the others do. Their eyes skim over your sandals, your knees, the crease in your collar. And then the other man steps forward. He wears clean sandals, polished. His tunic is crisp, his hands uncalloused. He smiles when he speaks, pacing like he owns the stones beneath him. He lies. You can feel it. Everyone can. But the lie is dressed well. It wears perfume. It walks with posture. And the court, they lean in, because in Rome, truth doesn't always arrive with patched sleeves. It's expected to shine. You try again. Raise your voice. Point to the contradiction. But it only makes you sweat. Only makes you look more frantic. The magistrate sighs. He doesn't want drama. He wants order. And you, with your rough voice and dirt-caked sandals, are disorder in motion. So he rules, not based on evidence, but on elegance. The man with silk wins. You're dismissed. Not with anger, not with cruelty, just disregard. Because in Rome, you don't have to be wrong. You just have to look like someone who could be. And Silket whispers a smoother story than truth ever could. The clerk can't find your scroll. He squints at the shelf, runs a finger along the dust, shrugs. You ask again. He shrugs again. It's not his problem. You stand there, hands still bound, waiting for someone to check again, to care. But no one does, because without that scroll there's no charge, no verdict, no scheduled hearing, no formal record that you exist inside these walls. And because there's no record, there's no release. You ask a guard. He frowns. No scroll, no orders. You ask again. He tells you to sit down. You're not being punished, they say. But you're not being freed either. You just are. Days pass, or maybe weeks. You sleep in the far corner now, beneath the leak that drips when it rains. The rats don't startle when you shift. The other prisoners stop asking what you're in for. You become a fixture, a shadow, a man whose guilt was never written down and whose innocence was never claimed. You dream of the outside sometimes, of bread, wind, a name that means something. But you wake to stone and silence, and a body that forgets how to stretch. You wonder where the scroll went. Was it lost misfiled, thrown in a fire by a clerk who didn't want to stay late? You'll never know, because in Rome, freedom doesn't live in truth. It lives in parchment, and sometimes the wind takes it away. The clerk can't find your file. He skims the scroll rack once, briefly, without much interest, then shrugs. His fingers are ink-stained, his eyes bored. You stand, still shackled, still waiting. A guard nearby scratches his neck, yawns, doesn't look at you. The clerk moves on to another name, another case. You speak, quietly, then louder. What happens now? The answer, nothing. Without that scroll, there's no record of your charge, no record of your arrest, no instructions for your release. You're not sentenced, but you're not free. You are officially in limbo. The guard shrugs again. We can't let you go. You ask for someone to check again. He tells you to sit down. There's no trial, no argument, no verdict, just waiting for a piece of parchment that may have never existed, or may have burned, or maybe under the wrong name spelled slightly wrong, tucked into a drawer. No one checks. So you wait, and Rome keeps turning. No one comes for you. No one asks your side. No one remembers your face. You sleep on stone. You count the coughs of the other prisoners. You learn which steps echo before the guards come. You learn how to disappear into routine. Soon you are not a man with a name. You are a man without a scroll. The other prisoners stop asking what you did. The guards forget why you're here. And you begin to forget too. The days smear. The light shifts. You mark time by crusts of bread and the chill in your bones when the wind slips through the cracks. Someone once told you Rome was built on laws, but here in this place you learn a different truth. Rome is built on records, ink, wax, paper, someone writing your name down in the right column on the right day. And if that doesn't happen, you disappear. Not dramatically, not in flames or chains, but quietly. Because in Rome, freedom doesn't come from truth. It comes from documentation. And sometimes the wind takes it away. You speak up, at last. Your throat is dry. Your voice cracks on the first word, but you steady it. You raise your chin. You say what no one else has dared to say, that this isn't right, that the accusations are wrong, that you deserve to be heard. You point to the inconsistencies, the names that don't match, the scrolls that don't exist, the witness who never arrived. You name it all. You risk it all. The room goes quiet, Even the magistrate lifts his eyes. Even the guard at the door pauses. For one breath, maybe two, you think it worked. And then, a shift. A sandal scuffs against stone. The lictor moves. You don't even see the rod until it lands, across your cheek. Hard, sharp, enough to split skin and silence in one swing. The room doesn't gasp. It exhales. Like they were holding their breath, waiting for the moment they knew would come. The magistrate doesn't raise his voice. He barely looks at you when he speaks. Disturbing public order. 3 words, calm, cold. He glances at your file. Faint ink, thin wax, double the sentence he says. It's over. You don't speak again. You press your tongue to the cut inside your cheek. Taste iron and dust. You lower your gaze. The fire that briefly rose in your chest is now just smoke curling around broken teeth. Later, when you're led back to the cell, one of the guards mutters, "Should have kept your head down." You don't respond, because you've learned something now. In Rome, silence is survival. And truth is dangerous company. It doesn't protect you. It doesn't free you. It doesn't even slow the whip. You thought that by speaking clearly, you'd find justice. Instead, you found the price of protest. And now, you carry it not in ink, not in guilt, but in the deep, pulsing ache of a swollen cheek. That's the story the system will remember. Not your words, just your bruise. What they did to you was legal. That's what they keep saying, over and over, like it's supposed to matter, like it's supposed to comfort you. The rope that cut your wrists, legal. The rod that cracked your ribs, legal. The hot iron pressed into your skin, legal. You ask why not in anger, but in that quiet, trembling way people ask when they already know the answer. The lictor doesn't flinch, doesn't look ashamed. He just shrugs and says, because the law allows it. And that's it. That's the whole answer. It doesn't matter that the accusation was shaky, that the witness changed his story, that the scroll was smudged, misread, passed from one clerk to another, like it was a loaf of bread. They didn't break the law, they followed it. Every lash, every shove, every bruise that blossoms purple beneath your tunic, all of it wrapped in legality like a poisoned knife, sheathed in silk. You try to sleep. You can't. Not because of fear that passed. What's left is duller, heavier. Your ribs creak when you breathe. Your legs ache when you shift. Even blinking feels like it takes effort. The pain lingers. But worse is the knowing that no one will be punished for what happened to you. Because what happened to you wasn't wrong. Not by the scrolls, not by the system, not by the men who watched, nodded, and moved on to the next case before your blood dried. You think about justice. You used to believe it had something to do with truth. Now you know better. Justice here is procedural. It doesn't care if the wrong man is punished, only that someone is, that the steps were followed, that the ink dried where it should. You imagine the scroll that holds your name, neat lines, stamped seal, maybe a note in the margin, processed. That's what you are now, processed. You touch your side where the bruise still throbs. It pulses like a second heartbeat, a quiet reminder that pain can be permitted. And you whisper not to anyone, just to the dark. Legal doesn't mean right. The shadows don't answer. Because in Rome, the law is a machine. It moves forward, crushes clean, and as long as it stays on track, no one questions what it leaves behind. You wait for trial. The guards told you to. Tomorrow, they said. That was 4 tomorrows ago. You sleep on stone. You eat what's left. You wait. Then one morning they come for you, but not to take you to the magistrate. They lead you outside past the court, past the holding pens, to the edge of the forum where the traitors gather. A man waits there, leather satchel, sandals too clean, eyes that don't blink often. He doesn't ask your name. He asks your age. He checks your teeth. He grips your shoulder, tests your muscle. The guard nods. The man nods. You realize they're not talking about your case. They're talking about your cost, the fine for your alleged crime, theft or trespassing or disrespect. You can't even remember what they claimed would have been a few denarii. But you're worth more than that. A body that can lift, pull, carry, obey. So they take you instead. No sentence, no scroll, just a transaction. You become coin, not the kind made of silver. The kind that breathes, that aches, that remembers how quickly silence turns into ownership. You're loaded onto a cart. No one tells you where it's going. The man beside you speaks a dialect you barely understand. By the time the sun rises again, You belong to someone else. A man with a vineyard and no patience. He doesn't speak your name, he gives you a new one, a shorter one, easier to shout. And just like that, the trial disappears. There is no verdict, no appeal, no record except maybe a note in someone's ledger, debtor transferred. Paid in full. You weren't proven guilty, you weren't proven innocent, you were just reclassified, from citizen to cargo, from defendant to asset. Because in Rome, the law didn't always care about justice. Sometimes it just needed the books to balance. And if selling a man did that faster than trying him, then justice would wait. And you would not. They called your name, only it wasn't your name. You hesitated, not because you were guilty, but because you didn't understand. The name they shouted, it sounded close, familiar, off by a syllable, a consonant. You stepped forward, confused. And that was enough. The guard nodded, grabbed your arm, you tried to protest, to clarify you said, to explain. But they didn't want explanation. They wanted resolution. You were the right height, roughly the right age, you wore the same beard. Your tunic was dusty just like his. That was enough. Someone somewhere skipped town, owed debts, maybe struck a merchant, maybe ran from the magistrate's men. He disappeared, and you were standing nearby when the scroll came out. They ask no questions. They tie your hands. When you plead, the guard scoffs. Why would he lie, as if the idea of mistaken identity is more far-fetched than guilt itself? So you're punished, flogged, fined, denied food for a day, laughed at by the magistrate who jokes, you should have run faster. You want to scream, not from pain, you felt worse, but from the sick knowledge that truth is smaller than a name written wrong. Later, someone realizes. A clerk finds the wrong birth date. A witness says, no, that's not him. A real friend shows up and says the man they wanted was taller, had a scar. But by then it's too late. The bruises are already fading. The scroll is already stamped, the mark already made. They don't say sorry. They say, mistakes happen, clerical error. You'll recover. And in Rome, that's the closest thing to mercy. You were punished not because they knew you were guilty, but because it was easier than checking twice. And when the system moves, it doesn't look back. Mistaken identity isn't a scandal here. It's routine. Just another name on another scroll. Just another man who looked like someone else at the wrong time, in the wrong tunic with the wrong beard. And now you carry the punishment. He carries nothing. Your family carries a curse, not the kind whispered by witches or etched on broken tombs. This one is inked in civic records. It begins before you, years before. Your uncle, a man you never met, once led a rebellion, small, doomed, swiftly crushed, but not forgotten. Rome doesn't forget. His name was scratched into scrolls, spoken in Senate debates, muttered by magistrates over wine. It faded from conversation, but never from the ledger. And now it follows you. When your trial begins, it's almost routine. A simple dispute, a merchant's accusation, petty theft, no evidence, just suspicion. You begin your defense. Then, a senator in the back raises an eyebrow. Isn't he from that family? He doesn't need to say more. Everyone hears it. You feel the shift. The magistrate doesn't lean forward anymore. The clerk stops taking notes. Even the guard at the door grips his rod a little tighter. You try to speak louder, clearer. But now your words sound different, like excuses, not truth. Because it's no longer just you on trial. It's your name. And the name remembers. You never knew your uncle. Never spoke to him. Never even saw his face. But his choices now color your own. You carry his shadow like a rope across your shoulders, taut, waiting familiar. The sentence comes faster than expected. A fine too steep to pay. A mark burned deeper than the accusation deserves. Not because of what you did, but because of who you are, or rather who they think you must be. Because in Rome, bloodlines bind, not with pride, not with inheritance, but with suspicion. Your uncle is dead, his ashes scattered, his rebellion long erased, but the stain remains, and you are the one scrubbing it with skin, with silence, with your place in the world slowly torn from under you. You walk out with the same name, but now it feels heavier. Not a birthright, a burden. And you wonder, what else will you carry, simply because someone else once dared to resist? The magistrate leans back. He believes you. You can see it, not in his words, but in his sigh. The way he rubs his temples. The way he doesn't look at your accuser right away. He knows you're telling the truth. Your story fits. Your timeline holds. Even the lictors seem unsure. But still, the magistrate frowns, because your accuser is a senator's cousin, owns 4 shops, lends money to the temple, hosts dinners for men who matter. And you're nobody. You work with your hands. You rent a room above a tannery. Your name doesn't carry weight. Your future doesn't threaten anyone. And so the magistrate makes a decision. Not out of anger, not even out of malice, but out of calculation. He rules against you. Softly, regretfully. As if his tone might ease the sentence. You are fined, marked, dismissed. And the magistrate exhales again, deeper this time. As though the hardest part was not punishing you, but knowing he couldn't afford not to. You walk out in silence, not shocked, just hollow. Because what do you say when even the man with the power agrees you're innocent, but punishes you anyway? You pass your accuser in the corridor. He doesn't smile. He doesn't gloat. He just nods. Because he knew how it would go. Men like him always do. And you were not punished for guilt. You were punished for inconvenience, for being in the way, for making justice harder than it needed to be. You returned to your room with less than you had before. Fewer coins, a bruised arm, a name whispered a little more carefully. And no, you don't expect an apology, because in Rome, innocence doesn't guarantee safety, not unless it's backed by favor, or wealth, or fear. You had none of those, only the truth. And in this city, truth is fragile, easily set aside, because sometimes even when justice knows the truth, it shrugs and looks away. You don't speak Latin well, not the way they do in court, not the way magistrates bark it, not the way clerks chant through scrolls like they're casting spells. You know enough to sell fruit, to greet a soldier, to say how much, how many, when, but not enough for this. The man reading your charge speaks too fast. The syllables slide past you like water you can't catch. You catch coin, you catch property, you miss the rest. You try to speak, to ask a question. You stumble on the verb. You mix up 2 endings. Someone snorts. The lictor shifts his weight. The magistrate frowns, as if your tongue is lying, as if confusion is proof. You ask slowly for help. The court clerk looks up confused. Help with what? No one offers a translator. No one slows down. Because if you live in Rome, they say you should speak like Rome, even if you arrived last week. Even if your village speaks Punic or Greek or some mountain dialect no senator has heard of. The law doesn't bend for accents. It doesn't wait for comprehension. You miss a word, a key name, the name of the man accusing you. You ask for it again. Too late. The magistrate is already writing, already sealing the scroll. Your silence was taken as hesitation. Your hesitation as deceit. And now you're condemned not by evidence, but by grammar. No one tells you the full sentence, just the part you understand: the fine, the pain, the shame. And when you return home, if you do, you try to explain. But even that becomes a blur, because in Rome, ignorance isn't excused. It's punished, even when the only thing you were guilty of was being born speaking something else. You worked with him. He stacked crates beside you, shared bread, laughed at the same jokes. You knew his name, not his history. You weren't close, just familiar. He never said anything, never bragged, never warned you, just showed up each morning, lifted what needed lifting, and went home when the sun dipped. Then one day, he doesn't show. The next, the guards come. They find his records, his scrolls, his debts, and your name listed once, maybe twice, as a helper, a witness, a man who once signed for a cart he borrowed. That's all it takes. Now you're in the same pen, same charge, same punishment. No one asks if you knew what he was doing. No one wants to hear that he never told you anything. They match the names, stamp the scrolls, 2 lines of ink, 2 bodies led in chains. You try to explain. You speak quickly, too quickly. The magistrate taps his stylus, already bored. He was caught, the guard says. And this one worked with him. That's it. You weren't judged by your actions, only by your proximity. You remember a day, not long ago, when you helped him lift a barrel. That's the moment, maybe. That's the line the law decided meant complicity. You wonder what you could have done differently. Ignored him. Said no when he asked for help. You thought you were being kind. And now that kindness, is a chain on your wrist. You never stole, but you handed something once. You never lied, but you stood too close to someone who did. And in Rome, that's enough. The guards don't need motive. The court doesn't need proof. Only names. And yours was beside his, in ink that won't fade, because here friendship can be fatal, especially if it shows up on paper. You didn't steal, you borrowed, to buy grain, to fix the roof after the rains, to bury your brother with enough dignity that the neighbors wouldn't whisper. You signed your name, or tried to, with hands still shaking from grief. The lender smiled, said it was fair, said the terms were generous. You didn't ask too many questions. You were desperate. Desperation always nods faster than reason. You tried to pay it back. You worked longer days, skipped meals, sold tools, but life kept happening. The roof leaked again. Your youngest got sick. The taxman came early. So the payment stopped. Just for a while, you thought. But in Rome, even a short silence grows teeth. Now the lender drags you to court. He doesn't shout. He doesn't sneer. He brings a scroll, neatly written, signed, sealed. The magistrate reads it. He doesn't ask why you borrowed. He doesn't ask how much you've repaid. He just asks, "Is this your mark?" You nod. You try to explain. Just ask for more time. The magistrate shakes his head, almost kindly. But still, he writes, you are sentenced to labor. Not for a week, not for a month, until the debt is repaid. But it never will be, because interest grows like weeds in spring. And wages especially, for someone like you, come slowly, if at all. Your sweat will pay the interest. Your pain will pay the fees. Your name will sit at the bottom of a scroll no one rereads. And now you're not poor. You're property. You sleep where you're told. Eat what's left. Work until your muscles forget rest. No chains, just obligation. It looks cleaner that way. The law says it's fair. The contract says it's legal. But your back says otherwise. You didn't steal, you borrowed. And in Rome, that's enough. Because here, poverty is not a condition. It's a conviction. And once it's written beside your name, it follows you longer than any sentence. You cough when they call your name, hard, deep, from the ribs. Your throat is raw. Each breath tastes like ash. You try to stand, but the floor tilts. Or maybe it's your head. The fever came last night. Or the night before. You can't remember. You try to answer, to say, I didn't do it. But your voice cracks, slurs, breaks into something that sounds less like a man and more like a moan. The magistrate frowns. Drunk, he asks. The lictor shrugs, possibly lying. You shake your head. But your balance betrays you. You stumble. Someone chuckles behind you. No one checks your pulse. No one touches your burning skin. No one smells the sickness that clings to your tunic like smoke. You're not helped. You're hurried. Stand up straight, the guard snaps. You try. Your knees fold. The magistrate leans back. This one's wasting time, he says. A decision is made quickly, cleanly. Your file is stamped. Your sentence sealed. No physician. No pause. You don't even understand the punishment until you're already back in the holding pen. Your ears are ringing too loudly. The fever is eating your memory like a slow flame. You lean against the wall. It's cold, thank the gods. Later, another prisoner tells you what was said, that you were rude, uncooperative, possibly hiding guilt behind slurred words and sunken eyes. You laugh, or try to. It comes out as another cough. You weren't hiding anything. You were just sick. But in Rome, illness doesn't excuse you. It incriminates you, because weakness looks like guilt, and silence sounds like a lie, and a body that cannot defend itself might as well confess. The accusation is absurd. He stole my chicken, the man says, breathless with indignation. Rode it through the forum, singing a hymn to Venus completely naked. You blink. The crowd does more than blink. They chuckle. Even the magistrate, straight-backed, sunburnt, half asleep, allows himself a smirk. The absurdity hangs in the air like a breeze, too light to ignore. You smile, then foolishly you laugh. Not loudly, just once. A single breath through your nose, a quiet shake of your shoulders. The magistrate's smile vanishes. He lifts his rod and slams it down. Mockery of the court, he says. The room stills. The accuser looks surprised, pleased. The crowd looks away. You try to explain that it was a joke, that everyone laughed. That even he laughed. But now your laughter is the crime. Not the theft, not the chicken, not the song. Just the audacity to laugh when you weren't supposed to. When you weren't the one in power. The magistrate straightens. His tone goes cold. You find amusement in your charges. You open your mouth, but there's nothing left to say. Not in Latin, not in gestures, not with a bruised silence where humor once lived. Your sentence is swift. Public lashes. A fine you'll never repay. Not because the accusation was proven, but because the laughter unsettled the balance. Because in Rome, humor is a privilege. And you with your patched tunic and cracked sandals were not granted it. You leave the court in pain. But worse than the bruises is the lesson. The next time someone tells a joke, you won't smile. You'll look down, stay quiet, play dumb, because in this city, laughter is dangerous, especially when it doesn't come from the bench. You light a candle. A small one stashed in the corner of your tunic, the wax soft from heat. You whisper a prayer to Mercury, god of luck, of messengers, of travelers, and thieves, and sometimes of the wrongly accused. You say his name with care, not loud, not boastful, just enough to feel like something hears you. You don't have incense, you don't kneel. You speak in your mother's dialect, not Latin, but you mean it. That doesn't matter. A priest sees you. His robes flutter, his frown arrives before his voice. You did not purify the space, he says. You did not bow. You did not offer smoke. You said the wrong name. You blink. Confused. I prayed, you say. But he doesn't see prayer. He sees offense. By the next morning, your trial changes. The theft is still there, scribbled in the scrolls. But now there's a second charge. Blasphemia. Not against a man. Against a god. Insulting the divine, they say. You try to explain that you meant no harm. That you believed. That you prayed for help, not to provoke. But the court doesn't ask what you believe. They ask what you did, where you stood, what direction you faced, what words you used. A ritual misstep is not a misunderstanding. It's a crime, the priest testifies. Says you disrespected Mercury, that you treated the god like a beggar at your doorstep. You want to laugh, but you remember the last man who did. So you stay silent. Let them talk about gestures, about posture, about divinity bruised by a man too poor to buy proper offerings. The magistrate doesn't need proof of malice, only that the priest felt offended. And the gods, well, they don't testify. Your sentence is increased, not for theft, but for your prayer. And when they lead you away, you look back at the altar. The candle you lit is still there, still burning, still flickering like hope. But in Rome, belief isn't a feeling. It's a script. And one wrong line can turn faith into offense. Because here, gods may be eternal, but reverence is regulated and mistakes are punished. You ask again, when is my hearing? The guard doesn't stop walking. He shrugs. Soon. You've heard that word before. It used to mean days. Now it means nothing. You wait, a week, a month. Time turns soft, shapeless. The light that used to slant through the bars no longer surprises you. It comes, it leaves, it returns. Others pass through. Some are tried, some sentenced. Some leave in chains, some don't leave at all. And still you're here. Not condemned, not cleared, just shelved. There is no verdict, no scroll. Only a fading memory of the charge, if there ever really was one. You try to keep track of days, of meals, of the names they call. You stop recognizing the faces. Your beard grows, your nails chip. Your voice becomes quiet, even in your own mind. The rats grow bolder. The straw gets thinner. Even the dreams fade. You ask again, a different guard this time. You try to sound polite. He laughs. You're still here, then walks away. You are not a criminal in the eyes of the law. But you are no longer a citizen either. You are paperwork misplaced, a scroll left under a cup, a name they forgot how to spell. And the worst part? No one is angry. No one is cruel. They've simply stopped remembering you. You don't need a sentence to be imprisoned. You just need to be ignored. And in Rome, forgetting is not an accident. It's an outcome. Because here, justice doesn't always say guilty. Sometimes it just stops calling your name. You didn't know it was illegal. Not really. You sold salted fish, cheap, fresh-packed in cracked clay pots. You stood in the shade between two citizen stalls. There was space. There was foot traffic. You needed the coin. And no one said anything. Not the man who sold garum beside you. Not the woman who bought 2 pots and smiled. You'd done it before. Then someone noticed. A citizen. A magistrate's cousin. He frowned. Asked your name? Asked if you had the right. You didn't. You're not a citizen. You didn't lie. You didn't argue. You just didn't know. It's an old law. Dusty. Buried in scrolls no one reads anymore. The kind of rule written before you were born. Before your village was even part of Rome. But today, someone decided it mattered. You're summoned. The charge violating Trade Ordinance 17C subsection something. No lawyer, no warning. You admit it. Yes, you sold fish. Yes, you stood in the wrong spot. You meant no harm. The magistrate raises an eyebrow. Ignorance, he says, is no excuse. You nod. You're fined more than you've ever held in your hands. You can't pay, which means lashes, or labor, or worse, all for a law no one enforced until today. You try to explain again that there was no sign. That you weren't stealing. That you were feeding a family, not breaking the republic. But the magistrate is already onto the next scroll. You walk out poorer, bloodier marked, not because you were a danger, but because Rome has too many laws, and when it needs to remind you who they're for, it opens one, dusts it off, and lets it fall on your head like a hammer. The law is not a warning here. It's a trap door, and you didn't even hear the click. You were near the stall, not buying, not stealing, just walking past, looking for shade, thinking about lunch. Then someone shouts, "Bread is missing." A vendor waves his arms. It was there, and then it wasn't. A crowd gathers. You're not part of it, at least not until someone points. "I saw him," they say. They don't say what you did. They just say they saw your face. Someone else nods. Yes, him? The man with the brown tunic. That's all it takes. No bag of bread in your hands. No crumbs on your mouth. No motive, no witness who saw you reach. But you were there. And here in Rome, that's enough. A guard steps forward, asks your name, writes it down. Another brings rope, shackles, a scroll. You try to protest. "I didn't take anything you say. I was just passing." But your voice is already lost in the noise of the forum, in the mutters, in the momentum. They don't need proof. They need resolution. You're led away. The bread is never found. The real thief is never named. But your name is inked now. Your wrist rubbed raw. And the record, the official one, says you were there. That's all future courts will see. Not the truth, just the geography. Because in Rome, guilt doesn't always come from action. Sometimes it arrives because you stood too close, too quiet, too unlucky. You weren't the thief, you were just in earshot. And now the law has heard enough. He hates you. You don't know when it started. Maybe the day you sold your goods 2 coins cheaper. Maybe the day his ox went lame and he needed someone to blame. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he just woke up angry one morning and your face was the nearest thing to punish. You tried to stay clear. You kept your greetings short. You never stepped into his stall's shadow. But in Rome, distance isn't protection. Because one day, without warning, he points at you in the forum and says, "That man stole from me." He says it loudly, clearly. His voice carries over the market noise. Other heads turn, and in Rome, a public accusation is already half the trial. You're stunned. Not afraid yet. Just confused. Because it's not true. Because it's absurd. But absurdity doesn't shield you. You try to explain. You speak carefully, maybe too carefully. A guard frowns. A scribe dips his stylus. Someone mutters, "Why would he lie?" You think, why wouldn't he? But no one asks you that. Your enemy has a clean tunic. A sharp voice. A friend who sits near the magistrate's cousin. You have none of that. And the law, for all its scrolls and seals, is still made of ears and glances. His voice echoes. Yours disappears. You're bound. You're charged. You're processed like wheat into grain. Later, someone will say it was a misunderstanding. That maybe he exaggerated. That perhaps the evidence was weak. Someone in the crowd whispered he didn't look like a thief. But no one spoke louder than the man who accused. And the magistrate, he smiled not at you, at the accuser, because in Rome the loudest voice is the one remembered, and truth is only as strong as the shoes that speak it. It rains on your trial day, not a light mist, a downpour. The kind that floods the gutters, soaks through cloaks, turns the marble stairs into slick sheets of hazard. The guards are irritable. The clerks grumble as they blot their smudged scrolls. Even the pigeons hide. And the magistrate, his sandals squelch, his robe drips. His mood is carved from thunderclouds. You're called forward. You take one cautious step on the wet stones. Slip slightly, recover. No one helps. The magistrate doesn't look up when your name is read. He taps his stylus on the edge of the bench. Fast, annoyed. He doesn't want to hear you. He wants to go home. The lictor rattles off the accusation theft, disrespect something else. It barely matters. You try to speak. Your voice echoes strangely in the damp. It sounds smaller than you meant. The magistrate sighs. Not because of you. Because of the rain. Because the day is long. Because the ink is running. Because the man 2 places before you argued for too long, and now his parchment is ruined. You see it happen, the decision. Before you finish your second sentence, he waves his hand. Fine him. How much, the clerk asks. Does it matter, he snaps. And just like that, it's done. No questions, no deliberation, no chance to explain. Just a sigh, a squelch, a verdict. You leave wetter, poorer, and more confused than afraid. Because today you weren't judged for your crime. You were judged for your timing. And in Rome, sometimes justice doesn't arrive wrapped in scrolls and oaths. Sometimes it drips from a magistrate's sleeve. Sometimes it sours under a leaking roof. Sometimes it drowns in a puddle no one bothers to step around. And you were just the next name on the list. You committed no crime, no theft, no violence, not even a raised voice. You simply made a joke. A small one tossed to a friend meant to lighten the weight of the heat, the crowd, the drums that had been beating since dawn. But it was the wrong week. Mars Festival. The god of war-blood courage. The forum draped in red, altars thick with incense, statues cleaned and oiled, everyone watching, everyone listening. And your words slipped. They weren't cruel. They weren't clever either. Just a careless line about the noise, about how even the gods must get tired of parades. A priest turned. He didn't scold you. He didn't need to. You felt it, the quiet, sharp pause around you, the way heads turned, the way no one laughed. That afternoon you were summoned, not for trial, not quite, for correction. You're charged with impiety, with disrespect, with social disorder. The magistrate doesn't raise his voice. He almost looks bored. You should have known better, he says. You nod. Because what else can you do? It doesn't matter what you meant. Not this week. Not during the festival. The punishment isn't harsh. A public apology. A fine. But the shame clings. You're made to kneel in front of the temple steps. Repeat a line written for you. I regret my words. I honor Mars. May Rome remain strong. The words taste dry. The crowd watches. Some smirk. Some whisper. You walk home slowly. And everywhere you go, the eyes follow. That's the real sentence, not the fine, not the forced words, but the way your name changes. The one who mocked the god, the one who joked during sacred time, the one who didn't wear red. And in Rome, shame spreads faster than blood. You didn't need to break a law, just interrupt a celebration. There's no victim, no stolen coin, no bruised flesh, no broken stall, no missing bread, no complaint on a scroll. Just a feeling. Someone said you looked wrong, that your eyes lingered too long near the armory, that your hands moved too quickly, that your steps didn't seem casual enough. You try to ask, where's the charge, where's the harm, but no one answers directly, because there isn't one. No damaged property, no crying merchant, no missing goods. But there's pressure, a magistrate with too many scrolls to clear, a guard who wants to look decisive, a city that needs to believe the streets are watched, and wrongdoers caught even if the wrongdoing is air. So you're brought forward. The accusation is vague. Suspicion of theft, of disorder, of something. You speak calmly, too calmly, they say. You point to the lack of evidence. They frown. Your clever one mutters, too clever. The magistrate doesn't want another debate. He wants resolution. He wants movement. He wants to go home before the candles burn too low. So he gestures, a fine, a mark, a short sentence. Just in case, he says, just in case. No proof, no person harmed. No missing item except your time, your dignity, your trust. You're marched out. Another name checked off. And the record? It shows you were punished. But not why. Because in Rome, the absence of evidence is not innocence. It's inconvenience. And inconvenience must be dealt with swiftly, quietly, efficiently. Especially when the scrolls are stacked too high. They find your name in the census. Not on purpose. Not from a complaint. Just a clerk sorting parchment, tracing lines, checking margins. And there it is, your name, your father's name, your profession. And beside it, a note, scrawled in red ink, minor infraction unresolved. No date, no detail, no proof. Just a smudge of accusation. The clerk flags it. The lictors follow. You're summoned. You ask what it's about. They shrug. No one knows. But it's here. They tap the parchment. That's enough. You explain, or try to, that you've never been fined, that you've never stood trial, that maybe it was someone else, or maybe a mistake. But Rome doesn't erase ink. It acts on it. You're fined. Not much. Just enough to hurt. You're flagged. Now when you trade goods, your name comes with a whisper. When you ask for credit, eyes narrow. You don't even know what you're paying for, but you pay it. Because if you don't, the flag becomes a mark, and the mark becomes a sentence, a shadow that grows. You ask again, what did I do? A clerk flips the scroll, shrugs. Could be anything, could be nothing. But nothing in Rome is still binding if it's written in the right ink. And you wonder, was it a real charge? A clerical error? A joke made by a bored scribe 2 decades ago? It doesn't matter, because in Rome, guilt doesn't need memory, just a line beside your name. They tell you to confess. They speak calmly at first, ask you to cooperate, say it will go easier if you admit it, whatever it is. You don't, because you didn't do it. Because you're tired, because nothing you say ever seems to matter once the scrolls start to fill. They call it resistance. They say if you had nothing to hide, you would speak. They say only the guilty go quiet. You open your mouth once, close it again, because your words are twisted too easily here. A protest becomes defiance. A defense becomes insult. And so you sit, still, mouth closed, eyes steady. And they don't like that. They whisper among themselves. He thinks silence makes him clever. He's mocking the process. He's hiding something. You are punished, not for theft, not for violence, but for failing to perform the script they expected. They fine you, strike you, mark your name in ink thick and final. No confession, but still guilt, because in Rome, silence is not caution. It's contempt. It threatens the rhythm of the court. It bruises the egos of men who demand to be answered. And defiance, even quiet, even unintended, is never innocent. You leave with a heavier sentence than those who screamed, lied, begged. Because at least they played the game. You stayed still. And in a place that thrives on noise, on control, on ritual. Stillness is an insult. Silence is a sword. And they know how to use it. You weren't even there. Not near the scene. Not in the city. You were 3 days' ride away, selling grain, sleeping in a barn, sharing wine with 2 men who would swear to it. But the crime happened anyway, under your name, or a name that sounded like yours, or maybe just your face sketched poorly, described vaguely. You didn't hear about it until the summons came. You rushed back, dusty, hoarse scroll in hand, a signed receipt, a list of names, witnesses who could speak for you. But the trial had already happened. The scroll was stamped, your name judged, the punishment already in motion. You plead with the guard. I wasn't here. I can prove it. He shrugs. You should have been here to say that. I didn't know I had to. He shrugs again. The court doesn't rewind. The magistrate doesn't reread old ink. The city doesn't hold its breath for new evidence. You're late. And in Rome, lateness is guilt in disguise. You try to find someone to listen, anyone, but no one wants to reopen a closed scroll. The punishment continues. Because here, justice doesn't chase the truth. It schedules it. And if you're not in the room when your name is called, you might as well have confessed. Because absence isn't neutral. It's final. It means you had no defense. It means you didn't care. It means to them that you're already gone, in body or in blame, and so your body is punished anyway. You weren't in the room. But now, you are. And the walls don't care why you arrived late. They only care that you came wearing guilt. A rich man loses a coin. Not a purse, not a chest. Just 1 coin, bronze, maybe silver. Barely enough to buy a loaf. But he's furious. He shouts, points at the ground, waves his hands like the gods themselves have been robbed. Someone must pay, he says. And you're nearby. A servant with a broom, a worker stacking amphorae, a body in the wrong place when the anger needed a target. You say nothing, because you know how these things go. The coin is gone. No one saw it fall. No one saw you pick it up, because you didn't. But that doesn't matter. A man of wealth cannot be wrong. Only wronged. He accuses. Not by name, but by proximity. The poor one, he says. Check him. The guards do. They find nothing. Still the magistrate frowns. You waste our time, he says. You dishonor the man's wealth with your denial. A fine is issued, 2 coins, double what was lost. You try to speak. Try to ask how this is justice. They call it compensation. For delay, for disruption, for daring to stand too close to someone richer than you. The scribe watched as the fine was handed down. He dipped his stylus, paused. The man had no coin, no voice, just dirt on his hands and wrong timing. 2 coins, the magistrate said. The scribe nodded, wrote it anyway. In the margins, he almost added a note. Nothing was proven, nothing was found. But he didn't. He never does. Because in Rome, the truth weighs less than the scroll. And a poor man's silence is easier to file. The magistrate knows your accuser. Not formally, not distantly. They dine together, share jokes, hunt boars in the same forest lodge once a month. They toast with the same wine, not at the same plays. Their sons train under the same tutor. You've never sat at that table, never owned a cloak fine enough to be mistaken for a guest. So when your case begins, it's already over. The magistrate greets your accuser with a smile. Thank you for making time, he says. Your testimony is greatly valued. You stand there, unacknowledged, unwelcome. You try to speak once. The magistrate waves it off. We've heard enough, he says. The scroll is stamped, the verdict sealed, your punishment written in ink still damp. The crowd murmurs approval, or maybe indifference, because they know. They know how this city moves. On paper, through courts. In truth, through favors. You weren't punished for your actions. You were punished for your position. For your lack of invitations, for the silence that followed your name when the guest list was read. And him, your accuser. He gets a nod, a clap on the shoulder, maybe an extra helping of roasted duck at the next gathering. Because in Rome, verdicts don't always come from evidence. Sometimes they come from dinner parties. And you were never invited. They meant to release you. The magistrate had reviewed the scroll. Someone had spoken up finally. Someone else had recanted. The seal was pressed, the word innocent inked with care. But the message didn't travel fast enough. It was nighttime. The prison was loud. Someone shouted, someone else shoved. You had a fever. You hadn't eaten in 2 days. Your body was thinner than your hope. The guard had the scroll in hand, still warm from the magistrate's seal. He looked around the cell, the name was called. But no one answered. A man pointed to the corner. The guard stepped forward slowly. A breath caught in his throat. You were there, still, cold, the ink still drying on the word innocent. He didn't say anything, just nodded. Later in the forum, the scroll was read aloud. Innocent, they said, and moved on. The guard didn't correct them. No one did, because in Rome, vindication always comes late, and death doesn't wait for stamps. You weren't recorded. No birth scroll, no registration, no citizen number, no patron to vouch for you. You were born behind a tavern, raised in shadows, named by someone who didn't stay long enough to remember it. You live in alleys, sleep beneath doorways, work when the market is too crowded for questions. You survive. That's all. But in Rome, that's not enough. Because when something goes wrong, when a vendor loses coin, when a noble's child gets spooked, when a rumor needs shape, they look for someone without papers. Someone who can't speak in court because they don't exist on parchment. Someone like you. You're seized. Rough hands, no explanation. Just mutters of he's always around, never trust a shadow. You try to ask what you've done, but ghosts don't get answers. You're punished. A beating, a branding, a silent nod from a clerk who doesn't bother writing your name. Because what would he write? You're not in the census, not in the guilds, not part of any known household. So they call you the one in the cloak, the boy with no sandals, a stray. And when the punishment is done, they let you go. But not as someone freed, just released, unchained, unnoticed, again. No one asks if it was fair, if you did it, if you even knew what it was, because in Rome, justice needs a target, but not always a name. You don't need to be guilty. You just need to be invisible. Some men are spared. Same charge, same scroll, same missing witness. same supposed crime. But they walk free, because their uncle knows a senator, because they once saved a magistrate's cousin from a snake, because their sandals are clean and yours are worn. You watch him leave. You both stood before the same judge. Both had no evidence. Both spoke softly, clearly. But he was offered leniency, time, a second hearing, a nod, and you. You were shackled before your sentence was even spoken. He glances back. Maybe guilty. Maybe smug. Maybe he forgets your name as soon as the gate closes behind him. It doesn't matter. The outcome is the same. Because in Rome, the law doesn't care about balance. It doesn't weigh the charges with equal hands. It reads the scroll, stamps the page, moves on. It punishes quickly, forgets slowly, and rarely questions itself. You didn't lose because you were guilty. You lost because you had no one to lean on when the decision had to be made. And him, he'll eat tonight. Sleep warm? Tell the story of his narrow escape like it was skill, not fortune. But you'll know. You'll remember the truth that every prisoner eventually learns justice doesn't tilt. It drops, and where it lands depends on luck. They call it the birth of civilized law. The 12 Tables, the Republic's foundation, the proud beginning of Western jurisprudence. In textbooks, Rome is where justice took its first clear shape, where reason rose above revenge, where written law replaced the whims of kings, where every citizen, in theory, could stand before a court and be heard. You've heard the praise. Historians call it revolutionary. Law professors still teach Roman principles. Legal codes from Europe to America echo their structure. Due process. Contracts. The burden of proof. Innocent until proven guilty. But what they don't always tell you is how often those principles were promises on parchment, not protections in practice. Because Roman justice, for all its order, had a hierarchy, a heartbeat that pulsed toward the powerful, a gaze that saw clearly when it looked upward and blurred when it looked down. The rich, they had time, advocates, influence. Their trials could stretch for weeks, sometimes months. Delays were strategy, outcomes negotiable. The poor, they had rope, quick hearings, faster punishments. And slaves, they weren't people in the eyes of the court. They were property, evidence, tools. In temples and forums, the rituals of justice played out with grandeur. But behind that marble, most cases were decided before the accused ever spoke, before a word was heard, before a name was even known, and even the gods were involved. A bird flying overhead, a breeze blowing the wrong way, a priest's scowl during your testimony, all could shift your fate, no matter what the scroll said. The truth is, Roman justice wasn't blind. She had favorites. She listened to gold, she bowed to reputation. And when you strip away the Latin, the togas, the statues, you're left with something painfully familiar. Power, protecting itself. Process masking cruelty. People punished not because they were guilty, but because someone more important needed them to be. So yes, Rome gave us the idea of written law. But it also gave us another inheritance, one we rarely name. The myth of fairness. The illusion of equality. The comforting lie that law by being written becomes just. But law doesn't enforce itself. People do. And people even in marble cities have their shadows. So tonight, after everything you've seen, ask yourself when they speak of Roman justice, when they praise its legacy, quote, its phrases build their systems on its bones. Ask justice for whom you won't find their names in the scrolls. Not often. Not clearly. Sometimes they are listed as property. Sometimes as wife of servant Tudo from elsewhere. But rarely as people. Rarely as citizens. Because in Rome, to be a citizen was to exist legally, socially, politically. And to be outside that circle was to be uncitizened. That meant slaves. That meant women. That meant foreigners, drifters, those born in the provinces. It meant anyone whose blood didn't carry the right names or whose tongue didn't speak Latin with ease. They lived in the city, built its walls, cleaned its streets, nursed its children. But they did not belong to it. They could be punished, but not protected. They could be taxed, but not represented. They could be judged, but not heard. Because not being called meant not being counted. And not being counted meant not being human. In the eyes of the law. A slave could not sue his master. A woman could not represent herself. A foreigner could be tried under a different set of rules or none at all. They were talked about, decided over, measured by what they lacked: virtues, gravitas, dignitas, words reserved for Roman men, full citizens, sons of fathers who had the right to vote, own, and speak. Everyone else they were presumed incapable of reason, too emotional, too primitive, too indebted, too other. And the law reflected that. Punishments harsher, trials shorter, protections weaker. The system claimed to represent everyone, but its definition of everyone was narrow. Deliberately so. It spoke the language of universality, but practiced exclusion as policy. It claimed justice as a Roman virtue, but made justice a locked door that required the right name, the right face, the right friends. And if you had none of those, then you were invisible, until you were accused. And then, suddenly, you existed, not as a person, but as a problem, a burden, a body to be punished. Because in Rome, the law was not your shield. It was a mirror. And if it didn't see you, you didn't matter. So tonight, imagine living under a system that governs you, but does not acknowledge you. That can reach out to hurt you, but not hear you. Imagine being judged by rules written for people who would never call you neighbor. Imagine knowing that to the law, you were not a person, but a category, a risk, a shadow. That is the plight of the uncitizen, not simply to suffer injustice, but to do so unseen. You would think you were entering a theater. The marble steps, the polished sandals, the magistrate's white toga, embroidered just enough to remind you who he is, a procession of scrolls, a chorus of attendants, phrases rehearsed like lines in a well-known play. Let the record show. Justice will be served. Speak only when permitted. There is drama, there is ritual, there is structure. But there is very little truth. Because in Rome, the courtroom was not a place for discovery. It was a place for performance. And the performance served one purpose: to preserve the illusion of order. The accuser plays his role outraged, but composed. The magistrate plays his neutral above it all, nodding at the right moments. Even the guards know when to step forward, when to glare, when to slam a staff to silence a voice. And you're not an actor. You're a prop. Sometimes you speak, but only if you know the script, only if your tone pleases the audience. Because this isn't a search for truth. It's an affirmation of structure. Justice in Rome wasn't designed to find out what happened. It was designed to show that someone was in control, that the rules still ruled, that chaos hadn't cracked the pavement. And if someone had to suffer to maintain that illusion, so be it. Other civilizations did it too. In Egypt, trials could be settled by oaths to gods, not investigation, but invocation. In Greece, a man's fate could be determined by how well he spoke, not what he proved. The stage changed, the robes changed, the language changed, but the audience remained the same. The elite, the educated, the well-connected. Justice became something performed in front of them, not something delivered to everyone. And if you were poor, or foreign, or unlucky, your role was not to be heard. It was to complete the story, to be the example. The body that confirmed the system still worked even when it didn't. You were meant to fall at the right moment, so the curtain could close with dignity. Think back to all those who were punished not for what they did, but for when they spoke, how they looked, who they couldn't afford to offend. Think back to the man sentenced for a missing scroll, to the child beaten because a noble's coin was lost, to the woman marked for life because a witness smiled more confidently than she did. None of them fit the play, so they were cast as villains, even when they were innocent, because in Rome, law was less about principle, and more about appearance. Justice was not blind. She was dressed, painted, presented, and her verdicts often written before the scene began. There were things you simply didn't say, not in the forum, not at the baths, not even in the dark when you thought no one was listening. You didn't accuse a magistrate. You didn't question a priest. You didn't name names, not if those names wore rings, or sat with senators, or had friends in the right domus. Because in Rome, truth didn't protect you, it exposed you. To speak honestly, especially upward, was to gamble with your life. If you accused someone powerful, you risked being counter-accused, for slander, for false witness, for disrespecting the dignity of the Republic, even if your claim was true, even if you had proof, even if others nodded quietly in agreement when no one else was watching. The law didn't catch corruption. It caught the inconvenient. And nothing was more inconvenient than someone who wouldn't stay quiet. So people learned to look down when passing patrols, to shrug when asked who started the fire, to forget publicly what they privately knew. It wasn't cowardice, it was calculus, because the law in theory was a net. But in practice, the more you struggled, the tighter it drew. If you insisted on your innocence, they called it defiance. If you protested too much, they said you were trying to distract. And if you spoke out against the wrong person, you didn't get a second chance. Maybe you were exiled. Maybe you were fined until your family starved. Maybe you simply vanished and no one asked where you'd gone. Because asking was dangerous too. Fear became the water people swam in. And silence. It became a kind of wisdom. Whole neighborhoods could watch an injustice and say nothing. A child beaten in the street, a vendor's stall burned for refusing a bribe, a man falsely accused by a noble servant. Everyone would see, and then everyone would go quiet. They had mouths, but no memory, ears, but no judgment. Because in Rome, survival meant disappearing into the crowd. Not just your body, your voice, your truth. And so justice, if it still lived, became a ghost. A name carved in marble, but never whispered at dinner. Because if no one dares to seek justice, if the truth is punished harder than the lie, does justice still exist, or has it become just another word, like virtues, like honor, like republic polished? Empty, safe to recite, dangerous to believe in. Rome fell. But its laws stayed. They outlived the Caesars, outlasted the legions, passed like whispers through parchment and empire. Byzantium kept the scrolls, copied them, called them sacred. Then came Europe. Medieval kings borrowed Roman punishments. Colonial governors cited Roman principles. Conquerors praised Roman order even as they built courts and lands they'd never called home. And always, behind the marble and ceremony, the same idea endured: the law is power. And power doesn't apologize. Roman justice taught the world how to codify control. It taught that society needed to be divided: citizen and non-citizen, landowner and laborer, us and them. It taught that punishment wasn't just correction, it was spectacle, a warning, a reminder that the state watches. It taught that law could be written with precision, but applied with bias. And perhaps most enduringly, Rome taught the idea of authority without question. The magistrate's word was final. The scroll spoke louder than the man it condemned. That belief never died. You can see it centuries later in feudal courts where peasants bowed before lords who ruled by blood, not fairness. In colonial outposts where laws were imported, but protections weren't. In modern systems where those who enforce the rules still sometimes bend them for friends or sharpen them for strangers. The shadow of Roman law is long. It gave us structure, but it also gave us scars. Scars we rarely examine, because it's easier to praise the architecture than to ask how many were buried beneath its stones. Easier to admire the logic than to feel the fear it once enforced. And maybe that's the hardest part of this history, that what we call civilization may be built in part from submission, from silence mistaken as agreement, from obedience shaped by fear. So tonight, ask quietly, when we inherit systems legal, political, cultural, do we also inherit the trauma beneath them? Can we admire the genius of Roman law without carrying forward its blind spots? Can we keep the structure without preserving the cruelty? Because if we don't ask, if we don't notice, then we're not just remembering Rome. We're repeating it. You don't live in Rome. There are no lictors in the street, no scrolls and wax seals, no trials held in open-air forums while the crowd jeers. You have rights, a phone, a lawyer maybe, a camera that can record everything, if you're lucky enough to be holding it when it matters. But still, when the knock comes at midnight, when the charge is vague, when your name is misspelled on a file that no one corrects, do you feel safer? Justice today speaks in a different language. But does it listen better? Now it's not a priest who frowns when you speak. It's a bureaucrat, an algorithm, a policy that wasn't explained to you but will still be used against you. You live in a world of paperwork, of security footage, of case numbers. But if you don't have the right lawyer, if you don't know the system, if you don't speak the language of authority fluently, you might find yourself back where you started. Back in a room where the verdict was already written. back in a system that moves too quickly to ask if it's going in the right direction. Some people get second chances. Others get silenced. Some are believed because they speak clearly. Others are doubted because they hesitate. A suit still buys more credibility than a hoodie. A confident tone can still outweigh an accurate story. And the difference between prison and freedom. Sometimes it's a matter of luck, of who picks up the case, of whether the footage is clear, of whether someone important is watching. We like to think we've evolved, and in many ways we have. There are rights now, appeals, courts that at least in name are open to all. But the shadow of Rome is long. It taught us how to organize justice, but also how to obscure it. It taught us the power of appearances, of paperwork, of punishing quickly, and questioning slowly. So maybe you don't live in Rome, but maybe the system that judged you still feels oddly familiar, cold, delayed, dressed in process, but not always in fairness. And maybe, deep down, some part of you still speaks in whispers when faced with power, still hesitates before filing the complaint, still wonders what it will cost to be right. Because Rome was never just a place. It was a pattern. A logic. A lesson passed down in robes and robes and robes until it wore a suit and tie and said, "This is progress. Maybe you escaped. Maybe you live free now." But ask yourself, did the system escape you? Or is it still there in how you move, how you speak, how you second-guess yourself when the world turns sharp? You were there the whole time, in the trial, in the cell, in the silence between accusations. You stood where they told you, spoke when allowed, knelt when forced. But now that it's over, now that the scrolls are closed and the sentence has been served, you ask the question you were too afraid to speak out loud. Was any of this ever about you, not your crime, not your name, not your pain? Just a case number, a body to process, a placeholder in the gears. Because law in Rome, and often still today, doesn't orbit around people. It orbits around power, around precedent, procedure, perception. It cares about clarity on paper, not clarity of truth. It cares about structure more than safety. It is designed to maintain itself, not to protect you. If you happen to benefit from it, that's a side effect, not the purpose. If you have status, it amplifies your voice. If you don't, it muffles it. The law does not bend to help the weak. It stands to prove it still works, and if proving that means someone suffers unjustly, it accepts that cost, quietly, routinely, efficiently. You begin to see it now, not as a shield, not even as a sword, but as a machine, one that turns with or without your name on the scroll, one that remembers its rituals, but not your face, one that cannot love and does not care. Because if you are not powerful, you are not necessary. You are incidental, replaceable. The system doesn't need you. It just needs someone in your place. And that might be the coldest truth of all. You weren't seen. You were used to keep the machine running, so now you stand at the edge of it, watching. Not in fear, not in fury, just in understanding. This was never built for you. Not the marble, not the scrolls, not the robes. And law in the end was never about you. You still think about it sometimes. The moment they called your name, the lictor's hand on your shoulder, the rope, the scroll, the silence. You try to trace it backward. What did I do wrong? Was it the look I gave? Was I too quiet, too poor, too close? But that's not the right question. Because in Rome, guilt was never the point. Truth was never required. Just timing, just convenience, just presence. You were there? That was enough. Someone pointed. That was enough. A witness smiled at the magistrate. Enough. Your shoes were dusty, your accent foreign, your name unfamiliar. Enough. You were confused. Or you couldn't afford a defender. Or you hesitated half a second too long before answering. All of that enough. Because in the empire, justice was a tool, not a search for what happened, a performance to show that the system still worked. Every trial proved that Rome could still punish, could still control, could still command fear. The verdict wasn't about you. It was about order. And what does order need? An example. Someone to be punished so that others remember their place. And on that day, you were that someone. Not because of who you were, but because you were available. The innocent were punished. The guilty were sometimes spared. The lucky escaped. The unlucky were crushed. It wasn't personal. It wasn't even deliberate cruelty. It was efficiency. You weren't a name to them. You were a cog, a token, a slot to be filled so the system kept turning. A thief went free. You took his punishment. The record still showed resolution, and that was the point. Not truth, not fairness. Just closure, fast and forgettable. That's the thing about empires. They don't need you to be guilty. They just need you to be there. And when the system finds you, it doesn't ask if you deserve what's coming. It asks if you'll fit the mold, if your conviction will be quiet enough, if your suffering will be simple to file away. And you were perfect, not special, not chosen, just convenient. And that may be the coldest sentence of all. You weren't destroyed because you mattered. You were destroyed because you didn't. What would you have done if they dragged you from the market, tied your hands with rough rope, paraded you past neighbors who didn't speak up? Would you have screamed? Would you have begged? Would you have cursed the magistrate, or bowed just slightly and prayed to be forgotten? If the lictor struck you, and the crowd turned away and the accusation made no sense, but the sentence arrived anyway, would you have protested? Or stayed silent just in case that bought you one less lash? If they offered you a chance, confess, and the pain ends. Deny it, and you stay in the dark without food, without voice. Would you have stood tall or whispered yes to something you didn't do, just to see the sun again, if they asked you to name another, a brother, a friend, just to ease your punishment? Would you have stayed loyal, or would you have said the name? Knowing it wasn't right, but also knowing it might save you if someone promised to help you for a price, and your last denarii slipped from your palm into theirs. Would you have risked hope, or swallowed it and accepted that no one was coming? Because not everyone who stayed quiet was weak. Not everyone who bowed was wrong. Sometimes to live, you had to disappear inside yourself. Let the moment pass through you. Take the shame. Survive the day. You think I would have fought back. But would you? Would you have spoken loud enough, knowing they only heard those they wanted to hear? Would you have run, knowing they'd chase you harder for daring to flee? Would you have stood in court proud and honest, knowing your truth meant nothing against a whisper from a man in finer shoes? What would you have done? It's not a question that needs an answer. It just needs to sit with you quietly. Because in the end, most people didn't choose to be brave or broken. They chose to keep breathing. And sometimes that meant bowing their head, biting their tongue, and waiting for the next day to come. We like to think the world has changed, that we have systems now, courts appeals, rights read aloud, that justice is no longer a game of robes and whispers, that it speaks in laws, not omens. But some days, you look at the forms, the codes, the files stacked higher than most people's hopes. You listen to the questions asked in courtrooms, not what happened, but do you have representation? Not what do you need, but did you meet the deadline? And you begin to wonder, do we have justice or just procedure? The scrolls are gone, but now we have databases, systems that sort by charge, not by story, sentences measured in numbers, not names. We say due process, but often mean efficient process. We say rule of law, but forget to ask who wrote the rules and who they were meant to serve. A law can be elegant, well written, clever. But is that enough? Does intelligence make it just, or does justice require something else entirely? Compassion, context, the willingness to pause when the machine says, continue. Because no matter how advanced our systems become, no matter how digital the court, how instant the records, the question remains, can a law be just? If it forgets the people it governs, can it protect someone it doesn't see? Can it offer fairness to someone who doesn't know how to ask for it? Think of the wax tablets in Rome, neat, precise, final. Think of how they erased people with a single stroke, filed them away with the same stylus used to list olive taxes and land disputes. Now look at today, digital flags, permanent records, a person's future decided by what a screen shows a judge in 5 seconds. Are we so different? Or have we just changed the costumes? If law forgets the person behind the file, if it rushes past pain in pursuit of order, if it replaces mercy with math, then maybe we've made something efficient, but not something fair. And so the question sits not in marble halls, but in fluorescent rooms, in late-night data entry, in the silence after a sentence is handed down. Not was the law followed, but did anyone remember the person? Close your eyes. It's late. The torches are low. You can almost hear it again, the crack of a lictor's staff on stone, the rustle of scrolls, the wax seal, still warm, pressed down by a ringed hand. Your name? Mispronounced. Copied wrong. Etched in wax that hardened too quickly. You remember your hands open, trembling, held out, not for help, but to be bound. And now, you remember how quiet the room was when they didn't ask for your side. How a single word from someone else became the fire that branded you. You never got to answer. You only got to carry it. But that trial is over. The ropes, the rod, the stone bench, they're gone now. Dust, ash, paper that crumbled 1,000 years ago. Even the staff, the one that cracked across your back, burned in someone's fire generations before your name was ever remembered. And yet, sometimes in the quiet of night, you still feel the weight, not on your skin, but under it. Because the deepest mark wasn't left by the lictor's blow. It was left by the silence, by the way no one asked what you needed, by how easy it was to forget you after you were used. You were not special, just one more name stamped into the system. Your shackles weren't iron. They were words, seals, dust and fire dressed as justice. And still, you survived. Not whole, not unscarred, but breathing. And now the torchlight is gone. Now the voices fade. Now the marble cracks, the scrolls rot, and the empire dreams itself into ruin. You're not there anymore, but you still remember, because sometimes remembering is the last way you tell the story right, even if no one else ever asked to hear it. The court is silent now. No footsteps on stone, no whispering robes, no magistrate's voice echoing through the chamber. Just the cold bench, the cracked floor, dust where a scroll once lay. No one's watching, no one's waiting. The guards are gone. The lictor's staff leans forgotten in a corner. The wax seal has melted. Your name is no longer on the list, not because you were proven innocent, not because someone wrote a correction, but because time did what the law never could. It let you go. And you're not there anymore. You don't sit on the stone. You don't flinch at the sound of boots. You don't carry that silence like a sentence. You walked out. Not with chains broken, not with a crowd cheering, not with the verdict overturned, but slowly, quietly, with nothing in your hands except understanding, the kind that burns a little, the kind that doesn't need to shout, because you saw what the court really was, not a place of truth, but of theater, not a balance, but a stage. And now, the curtains have fallen, the ash has settled, the room is empty, and if you listen carefully, you'll hear it, nothing, no verdict, no punishment, no more waiting for someone to call your name. You've already left, not with your feet, but with your mind, with the knowledge that justice may forget people, but people don't forget justice, even when it failed them, especially when it did. So rest now. You've walked through the trial. You've seen its shape. You've felt its chill. But the doors are behind you. The courtroom is crumbling. And you are not what they said you were. You're not in Rome anymore. There's no lictor at the door, no crowd outside, no scroll waiting to decide your worth. No one's calling your name tonight. No one's watching to see how loud you breathe. No one's waiting for you to misspeak. You're here, where the mattress is soft, where the fan hums in its slow, lazy circle, where the walls don't echo with judgment, only quiet. No chains, no cold bench, no list with your name on it. Your hands are empty now. Not tied, not raised, not trembling. They rest beside you, still, unnoticed in the best way. Your body, the same one that once flinched at footsteps, is finally allowed to feel heavy. Not with dread, just with sleep. And your breath. It's not hurried, not held like a secret. It moves in and out like waves on a shore that no longer floods. This is not Rome. This is not a sentence. This is not a test. It's a room, yours. A place without verdicts, without watchers, without punishment, waiting in the dark. You are not on trial here. You are not being measured. You are not being made into an example. You are safe. The past is quiet now. The scroll has burned. The court has emptied. And you're no longer part of that machinery. You're something softer. Someone's still here. So let your eyes close. Let your shoulders fall. Let the fan spin. Let the night hold you. Because whatever Rome took, It didn't take this. Not the quiet, not the breath, not the right to sleep without fear. And you're not in Rome anymore. You don't belong to Rome. Not anymore. Not ever again. You don't belong to the court that forgot you, to the gods who didn't answer, to the scrolls that miswrote your name. You are not their property, not their proof, not their lesson. Tonight, you are no citizen of empire, no subject of law, no shadow of someone else's guilt. You are a citizen of nowhere, and that is freedom. No borders, no seals, no waiting for permission to be at peace. You don't need to be declared innocent. You don't need a God to vouch for your soul. You don't need law to tell you you deserve rest. You're already here. The mattress beneath you, soft, still warm. The fan above, steady, rhythmic, faithful in its turning. No eyes on you, no name shouted, no footsteps in the dark. You are not watched. You are not questioned. You are not next. You're done. And what comes now? Not justice, not ritual, not forgiveness, just sleep. The kind that comes when no one is asking anything of you. The kind that doesn't flinch when the floor creaks. The kind that trusts the silence. Let it take you. Let your breath slow. Let your fingers curl just slightly into the sheets. Let your weight sink, not like someone collapsing, but like someone being carried. Because that's what sleep is now. Not surrender, but return. To yourself. You are not Rome's anymore. You are not anyone's. You are yours, fully, finally. And you fall softly, not into punishment, not into memory, but into a quiet where no one follows. Like a dream breaking, like smoke drifting, like a name disappearing from the wax. Sleep, citizen of nowhere. There is nothing left to prove.